right, we're back. Pipe Dreams podcast here, back in the Ocho.
22, baby.
Episode 22. Season ended, so we're back here in the West Coast. Super happy to be here.
It's 1,000 degrees.
It is, yeah. What do they say? It's hotter than what?
The sun.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, we basically raced last weekend and just made our way out here, and super excited to get the season going at Chuckwalla. We did a little bit of riding. Jimmy flew out on the Big Bird, doing a little coaching. That's it. We got one more day left here. I got a good guest. We've been trying to get him on for a while, but he's kind of avoiding us a little bit.
He's elusive.
He's elusive. That's a good word.
Just had a birthday.
It's an SAT word. But before we get into that, thanks to everyone that has been giving us some feedback on the Ben Spies episode. That was a lot of fun and got some really good insight from people on it and a lot of good feedback. So stoked on that.
Dude, be pumped, dude. It's one of our biggest pods. We blew up. We're in the ether, boys. We're in it. We finally made it. So I'm fired up, dude. We're in the ether. Keep sharing that shit. That was sick.
These guys sending me YouTube analytics every day. You'd think we would have hit the jackpot.
Dude, we're monetizing. We're good. No, seriously, thank you, everybody, for sharing and commenting. I know it's a pain in the butt sometimes to comment and all that, but we really take it all seriously. We look at every single comments, and it helps us drive this thing forward, and it allows us to continue actually putting all this work in to do it, because it does take a lot of work. So please continue to like and share that. But we got a great guest. This guy he's been in our lives a long time. Jason Pridmore, he's on the pod today. This guy's won 21 times, two-time champ.
World champ, right?
He's got so many accolades. Amateur golf champ in Sadako, I believe. Just absolute legend.
Oh yeah, that's it. That's probably the best thing I ever won. Maybe.
Greatest MotoAmerica announcer of all time. Number one.
Yeah, he's definitely probably over Greg White too. No, seriously, JP, dude, thanks for coming on Pipe Dreams. We've been trying to get him on for a long time. He's been in myself and Corey's lives for a long time as for us racing, and yeah, we're stoked to have him on. But before we get into that, we got two sponsors that we want to roll on. Law Tigers, America's motorcycle lawyers. If you or somebody who's in a motorcycle accident, please call 1-800-LAW Tigers. No fees to the rider. You never ride alone with Law Tigers. And we've got our new sponsor, Yuasa Batteries, the most trusted battery in power sports since 1979. For over 45 years, Yuasa has delivered power, reliability, and passion at every turn.
Visit yuasabatteries.com. You can find fitment for your motorcycle, ATV, even cars and trucks they do some batteries for. Yuasabatteries.com. Find your local dealer. Go get a new battery if you need it. Keep that thing on a tender so she don't die. And that's it. Thanks Yuasa. Thanks Law Tigers for supporting the pod. And yeah, let's get into it, dude.
Let's do it. JP, it's been a while, but we finally got you in.
Been worried it's going to be a roast, so been hiding and avoiding from you guys.
The roast of JP.
That's it.
No,
you guys got a lot of material, so got to be careful what I say here.
No, come on.
No, but first off, hey, listen, congrats to you two guys. Like this thing you guys are doing is really cool, and I've enjoyed watching some of the episodes for sure. And I've seen you two guys from when you were. I still look at you as kids, but but congrats on this. This is really cool. Thanks for having me on.
It's kind of funny. Hearing your voice, like, usually when you get in this kind of situations because you're on TV.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm being careful. You're a little stuffy today. I can tell you're a little stuffy.
Yeah.
And you said something about Tinder just now with the Yuasa thing. So I did you say something about Tinder? Yeah. Oh, Tinder. I got it. Okay.
Right away, dude. I love it.
Just taking me in a hole. What have you been up to?
Well, like this year has been an amazing year for me. I don't know what happened, but I remember it pretty vividly at the beginning of January. Like, wasn't a New Year's resolution or anything like that, but I just decided that I was on the phone with one of my friends, and his kids, Nate was my buddy Nate. His kids were going to start thinking about going to Mammoth, and I always wanted to do that. So it just started kicking off this crazy year that I had, and so like on January 8th, I decided that I was going to join a gym because I thought I was going to do Mammoth. And it seemed like a great idea because I hadn't ridden a motocross bike in 7 years. And January 11th, I looked it up, and you had to qualify. So I was like, I got some time. I looked that up, and I had 3 weeks to get ready, and I didn't have a bike. I didn't have gear, had nothing. And that's what kicked off this year. And then that turned into, I don't know how, but it turned into me qualifying for Mammoth and then getting myself in trouble to go to do the Spa 8-hour in Belgium with Michael and Andrew, Michael Gilbert and Andrew Lee. And it's just been a whirlwind. The year has gone by so fast, and it's been a lot of fun. And here we are. We're back at Chuckwalla now. So it's been a wild summer. A lot of fun though.
It's kind of funny because people usually are like, like New Year's resolution, we're gonna go to the gym, we're gonna get skinny. This guy decides he wants to pick up motocross.
I know.
I'm
not good. And I'm not good either.
Dude, let me tell you, when I got the picture, like, hey, you sent me, I forgot who else was in it, but was it me and Kyle or somebody? I don't know. You said something and it was just JP, the 43 on the back, like, hey, I had a great day today. And I was like, I'm like, what is this guy doing?
Yeah, me too. Well, the first day I came back, to try it, I went out to LACR with Michael Gilbert, and I literally got in my van with tail between the legs, and I called Corey Newer right away and said, I'm not doing this unless you come to the track with me like 2 days later. Because I was so bad, I thought this isn't going to end well for me at all. And I thought maybe I'd miss the whole MotoAmerica season due to injury, on a motocross bike. So yeah, and then I went out 2 days later, and it kind of started clicking for me. And then we had tons of rain, so I never got to get on the bike. So like my second or third time on the bike, I was at Glen Helen trying to qualify for Mammoth. And I was so scared. It was like, just take me right back to, when I started racing. And I was like, what am I doing? Like what? But I'd had a friend. How it started is I'd had a friend that 30 years ago, he was a big influence to me. He was one of my best friends, and he was going through some rough times. And he walked into my garage one day, and he saw me cleaning my motocross bike, because I used to train on it. And he starts asking me stuff about my bike and why I'm not doing this and why I'm not doing that. And I looked at him like, how do you know so much about this? Well, 10, 20 years before that, he was a local pro. And so I said to Mark, why don't you get a bike? And he's like, the only way I'd get a bike is if I could do Mammoth. And I didn't really know anything about Mammoth then. So, of course, I said, well, I'll go with you. I had a broken leg. So I said, I'll go up there with you. Broke it on a motocross bike. And so I went to Mammoth with him. And then we made a pact, kind of like, we're going to come back and do this together someday. But he's since passed away, sadly. And then Nate's kids have been going, and I've heard nothing but amazing things about Mammoth motocross. So I just made it a goal. And it was great. It was fun just kind of getting back at it again and getting in the gym and losing 12, 15 pounds, whatever it was. And then that just kind of led to other things happening this year that I wasn't expecting to happen. And they just started kind of falling into my lap. And I thought, you're only 54 years old once, so you might as well just jump in. And I did feel silly at times, but I took it seriously just like I used to, and I had fun. It's good.
Do you feel like we talked about it with Ben a little bit, but like, obviously you've been retired for a long time now, but just in general, like life after racing, do you find it hard to live normally, right? Without setting like those things of like, I'm going to set a goal to go out and race Mammoth, and I'm going to go qualify for this golf tournament or whatever the case is. Do you find it kind of hard to...
Corey, there was a lot of people before me, and I saw what it did to them not having anything else. And, golf was great, because what golf did for me when I was younger, I didn't know it was going to be as influential to my career as it was, because how it turned out is my friend Mike and I were both getting the top ends done on our 80s. We used to race 80s. And both our bikes were in the shop in the summer. And he goes, you want to go play golf? I'm like, no, that's a big negative. Don't want to do it. And I ended up going and playing 9 holes. And the thing I liked about it was the individuality of it. Like, the only way you're going to get better is if you work hard. And it's really hard to pick up later in life, because especially if you're an athlete, or because you got to put so much time into it. But so when I was younger, I used to put time into it. And then when I started racing, back in the day when things started clicking for me, I would just get up in the morning and get all my workouts done. So I'd be up early, and by 10:30, I'd be done with everything I needed. And then I'd just go practice. And then it paid off. I mean, it paid off so much for me to be a decent golfer, because you go onto a golf course and you spend 4 to 5 hours with people, and they get to know who you are. It's not like, even when we would go do media days and things like that at the races, I always remember Mid-Ohio used to do a golf tournament, 9-hole tournament. So there would be journalists coming from Cleveland and everywhere, and what TV journalist or newspaper guy wouldn't want to just get out of the office and go play 9 holes? So there'd be a group of riders, and we'd go play this 9-hole tournament at a course not too far from Mid-Ohio. And it took the helmet off the riders, and they got to understand us. We're not just some crazy guys just with death wishes or something like they'd write about. So there was a fan base that was developing in Mid-Ohio based off of that, I felt, and so then everybody wanted to play golf. And of course, if you go out and you beat a couple guys, they want to come after you and get better, just like being competitors. So, but now, as I've gotten older, I've just wanted to get better and better, because I think you never really lose that competitive juices or whatever you call it, So now I play golf at a pretty high level, and I work on it, and I love it. It's great. It gives me something to do.
Do you think that's like one of the biggest things when you did retire that helped you get through that? They always say like the top athletes have like the retirement depression.
Yeah, for sure. Like James, I played golf at the time when I was actually when I was racing for MJ. There was a lot of really cool connections getting met for me, and I played with the number 1 guy in the world, Luke Donald, at the time. And so I had this crazy thing that when I was done racing, I was going to turn pro, and I knew how hard I worked at it. But you got to remember, while I was racing motorcycles for all those years, those guys were practicing golf. And I got to play with him. And I remember on the 13th hole, I had a little interaction with him, some little bit of shit talking. And I walked by his ball, and I'm like, you got no chance of getting this up and down. I just kind of razzed him a little bit. And he hit it to like a foot. And I was like, oh, there's a whole nother level to this. Like I wouldn't know how to hit that shot, So, but still at the amateur ranks, golf is very, very difficult. It's super hard. And it just gives me something to kind of, I look forward to playing. It's fun. It's taken me all over the world. I've met some incredible people playing, and it's been good for me.
You live in a pretty good area for that too. For people that don't realize as well, right? I mean, it's sunny all year long, more or less.
The club I belong to, Saticoy Club, when I was 20, when I was a teenager, I was always thinking to myself, man, if I could be a member at a club like this, it would be the most incredible thing in the world. And there are days when I'm up there and I just sit there and I think I'm the luckiest guy ever, because I'm out there. I'm 8 minutes from my house. I might be the only one or on the golf course or with my friends or whatever, and the weather's perfect. And it's just like it's a good place for me to be. It's even on days where I'm not feeling great or you go through your ups and downs, I can always go there and just find a little solace and practicing or working on something.
Yeah, me not so much with golf.
You got a good swing though. They don't know. They don't know, Corey.
I don't know. You live obviously Ventura, California, but a lot of people, obviously you've been around for a long time, and we know your history growing up around you. But I feel like a lot of people now, just because there's a lot of new fans that are coming in, people don't really realize they just know you're an announcer that used to race. But so I've lived in California your whole life, but your parents are from England.
Yeah. Right.
So when did you guys actually come? You were born in England?
I was born here.
You were born here.
So my parents came over. They got on a boat and got dropped in New York, and just my mom and dad, and they decided to start heading west. And they the way the story kind of goes is they didn't really know where they were going to end up, and they just kept going and going, and they ended up in Santa Barbara. And to this day, I thank my mom every day. I don't want to say any other states that might be along the way because I don't want to offend anybody, but I ended up in Santa Barbara, and I was born 5 years after they got here. And I grew up in Santa Barbara for the first sort of 10, 12 years of my life. And then my dad owned a BMW dealership, as well as obviously racing and things that my dad did. And that was in Goleta, which is, right next to Santa Barbara. And then when I was about 12, we moved to Ventura. They moved the business, and so they moved down to Ventura, and I've literally been there since I was about 12.
Yeah, it's sick. I mean, we've both been fortunate enough to crash at your place a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, it's beautiful there.
Yeah, it's good.
It is one of my favorite spots. Your dad, for people that don't realize as well, his background was racing.
Yep.
3-time champ.
In AMA, but he raced in Europe before that.
He raced in England and things, and I think that the dream for, back then the big dream was always get to America. Everybody wanted to get to America, and my dad and my mom sacrificed a lot to do that. And then, I've obviously growing up with him, like he was like I idolized him obviously because just of the things that he did, and when he won Superbike championships, I was 8, 9, 10, so I remember that, and he was pretty versed. He did a lot of different type. Like he raced sidecars at the Isle of Man. I was at the Isle of Man with him in '79 and '80, I think. So I was, 9, 10 years old, going to the Isle of Man and watching my dad race sidecars with my Uncle Kenny, that you guys know, and so he did a lot of things, and he won his first Superbike championship in '76 for BMW, and then he backed those up for 2 years with Kawasaki in '77, '78. And it was a bad accident that hurt him in '79. That he never really came back from that after that one. He raced a few times, but he never, at that point he got hurt pretty bad.
So when growing up, was it always you were going to race motorcycles? Like what? I mean, you said you idolized him.
Yeah.
Obviously growing up with a champion and whatnot, it's pretty easy to fall in the footsteps. And when did you get on a bike?
I was pretty groomed for it. I was on a bike when I was literally just a little after 2 years old. I've seen photos. And yeah, I was on a bike and being around bikes all the time. That's all I knew. I just loved being around bikes. But my dad, to be fair, he never pushed me that way. Like, it wasn't like I had to ride motorcycles. It was a decision. It was, if he wants to do it, great. If he doesn't, we'll support him in whatever. Both my mom and dad were like that. But I just, I loved it. I was always at the dealership, and I think that actually helped for me because I was always around bikes. It wasn't like I was just going to 6-8 races a year. I was always around bikes. And then I got into BMX, and again, 2 wheels, just it kept churning in my brain that that was happening. And then for a brief time when I was in high school, I thought, I'm going after golf. That's what I thought. I thought, I'm gonna have a go at this. But that was, it was a weird time for me. I was 13, 14, 15 years old, and I was getting to go. My dad started a school then, so I was going all over the country to these tracks and riding them all, just getting to see them. And then it was a decision. Once I became a junior in high school, I decided, golf would be great, but I'm kind of groomed for the bikes, so that's kind of what I did.
And back then, was it like your dad famous? Like, was it like a big? Obviously, the world of racing was much different back then. Was it like that?
It's funny. It's I think when you had Chuck on here, all those stories he was telling you guys were great, because I remember Kenny coming along and Skip Asklin coming along and all those guys, and Gene Romero. There was a lot of guys when I was younger that I looked up to, and then when Superbike started, it was new, and so my dad was the guy there. And so I remember going to an AMA awards banquet and seeing there that, well, my dad is actually, like, this is a big deal, like winning Superbike championships and things. And I think as a young kid, you look at that and you go like, wow, that's pretty cool. It's my dad up there on stage collecting the #1 plate, and you go, I think it was influencing to me. And then my dad he'd get offers, he'd go race the Bull-D'Or, he'd go race Suzuka 8-hour. He never actually got to complete the 8-hour, which was a shame. He got hurt both times he went there. He got hurt at Suzuka, so he never got to complete that, which was a shame. But I know he did. Stories I hear, like, he did the Bull-D'Or 24-hour with just 2 guys, just him and another guy.
That's crazy.
And I'm like, yeah, that is crazy, because I've done those, obviously. And but he was when he was with BMW, he was factory BMW, so he was going and doing all these really cool things, and so I remember a lot of that.
That's cool. When you had the dealership, was that like it was racing and he was running the dealership? So he was doing both at the same time?
He was doing both.
Was it like a big championship back then, though? Like,
I don't think it was as big then, because it was just kind of in its infancy, and not to downplay it, because they pioneered it. Those guys are why we are racing superbikes today, right? Production-based bikes. And back then, as I recall it, there was always a little bit of knocking heads between pure race bikes like the TZ750. Then you had these production bikes that were just basically rolled off the showroom. So, what is world racing, in that kind of thing. I kind of remember a little bit of that when I was younger, but superbikes evolved pretty quickly. Like the Japanese were behind it. And I remember companies like Moto Guzzi being behind it. And so there was multiple brands back then that were still jumping in. And I remember Yoshimura jumped in early. So it was growing quickly. And, for my dad to win the first 3 Superbike championships, and there were some amazing riders back then still, that like Wes Cooley ended up winning it in 1980, but he was around when my dad was there, and others. So I remember Mike Baldwin, that's kind of the 43. I remember him back in the day. So there was some really amazing talent back then. And
is that where the 43 came from?
No, the 43 is an interesting story. My number when I very first started, I was 43, and then for whatever reason, I think I finished 7th in a championship. So I'm like, well, 4 plus 3 is 7. So then they wouldn't give me 7 again, and so I thought, well, if I could win a championship, 4 minus 3 is 1. So there was all this combinations, and it always ended up coming back to 43. So that's kind of how it started for me. I had all these little things in my brains of how it all kind of connected. So that was it.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's actually how kind of it worked for me too. Because I was 71.
Yeah.
And
I thought you just took it because you liked him so much.
He
I
did.
just took it over, dude.
I took it over.
The 43, baby.
Yeah, that's it. I remember.
Yeah.
From there, obviously growing up in California, motocross was at that time was probably the bigger thing, right? Was road racing?
I think motocross was pretty big. I remember, but there were so many tracks to go to, Corey, in California at the time. Indian Dunes is where I used to always go. It was 40 minutes from my house, right by Magic Mountain, Yeah. So I grew up going there and racing Friday night motocrosses and things. And, I remember mowing lawns so I could make my entry fees to go do that. So I'd be Saturday mornings. I remember I'd be out mowing the lawns and just so that I could have enough money to go to the next Friday night motocross race. And
funny.
I remember I remember that like yesterday. Like even when I drive through my old neighborhood and stuff, I remember all the lawns I used to cut.
Were they just like, was it a push mower where it just?
It was a push mower, James.
Where you
No
just,
motor.
I wasn't sitting on it.
It just, you had to push it and it just started.
Yeah,
one of those.
It was like had square wheels the whole bit. It made it really difficult.
But,
got my donkey out in front of me plowing it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So, but what was like the championship when you came up and started road racing? You were going to a lot of schools. Was that Kawasaki at the time, or was it Suzuki?
I was on Cowies when I very first started doing the AMA stuff. I was on Kawasaki's. I'd come from Suzuki's. I did the Weir stuff. Weir is where I started.
Okay. So, and how big was Weir? Was
big.
it like a national, or was it like, you know how they have Weir Nationals, or was it?
It was big.
Okay.
And it was when I was doing it. I started doing it with a buddy of mine named Avery Stewart, and I'm trying to think what year it would have been. It would have been maybe like 1990. We went and did the Weir National Endurance Championships, and it was like just the two of us in a Iveco van, like big Iveco truck that had weird tire sizes. So every time we got a flat, we were in a lot of trouble. And we traveled all over the place. And then they do the Weir National Endurance Championship on Saturday, and then Sunday would be the sprints.
So there was money back then too.
There was money back then. Yeah, the Suzuki Cup stuff was good. I was so new to it though that. I was probably finishing 5th and 6th, and I was talking to somebody last night about Grattan, Michigan. I think it was, it was me and Timmy talking last night. And Grattan's where I finished 3rd in the rain, and it was like my first like podium, right? And that was a Weir National. That was cool for me back then,
And that was a big deal when you were actually like, give you podium in a club race now or whatever. It's like,
make $1,000 or something for finishing 3rd or whatever it was. And I was like, oh my God, I hit the jackpot. Like I made it, like hard to wait to get the check in the mail.
Even when I was there, the Suzuki Cup was at its end, but it was like, it was a big deal. You could, at the time when there were so many Suzuki teams, you could get noticed and go.
A lot of guys were just going out and they were buying a little bit before me. Obviously, Doug Poland was very well known for, that's how he basically survived for a couple years. He had Suzuki Katana 600s and 750s, and he was just traveling everywhere. Every weekend he was racing a club race, every weekend for 30 weeks straight or something. And then he'd hit a national, and he just made all this money, on contingency. So yeah, that's why it's like been great this year seeing Honda throw contingency back up for these guys, and they can make a little money.
Yeah.
Do you? So how did you go from Weir Nationals with your buddy?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many years did you race Weir?
I did Weir in 90, and then the thing is back then you had to ride for Valvoline, which was John's team, Ulrich's team. So that was my goal. Like riding for John was for me was like, if I get to that point, my career's done. I'm perfect. Like that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to race, the endurance bike, and it never really panned out for me there. In 91, I got an opportunity to join the team, but I never got on the A bike, and I never really got the opportunity to really do anything good there. And I was at a race in Moroso, Florida. I was at a Suzuki Cup race trying to make money, and I was down there, and I had a clutch go out. And you guys know me with mechanical stuff, right? Yeah, that's all you need to say right there. So I'm not really a mechanical guy, and my clutch went out, so I didn't know what side of the engine that was on. So all I remember is going and asking, like, where I went to the announcer. I went to this booth, and I said, "Hey, can you ask around and see if anybody's got a clutch?" And this big guy came walking up to me and hands me a clutch. And I thought, what a nice guy. I thought, well, now what am I going to do? Because I don't know what to do. This guy got a clutch. And so I went chasing him down. I said, "Hey, this is going to sound a little cheeky, but do you think you could help me put this in? Because I don't know what I'm doing." So he did. And then when I got home, I ordered 3 clutches and sent them to him. And he called me right away and he says, "You sent me 3 clutches." I said, "Yeah, you bailed me out. Like, I wouldn't have been able to ride." And his name was Jake Van Vliet, and he lived in Tampa, Florida, and it made an impression on him that I did that. And so he was immediately like, I did good down at this club race that he helped me at, and then that turned into him and I getting together, and then we came up with a plan to race ZX7s in '92. That was going to be my first year doing AMA stuff in 1992.
That team was called
Class Racing.
Class Racing.
That was my dad's school, and he helped obviously a lot at that point. So, it was called Class Racing, and I was I'd done a couple nationals on the Suzukis in '91. When the wear thing wasn't working out for me, I decided I'm going to go do some other stuff because I went to MotoAmerica that year, and I think I did like 3 AMA nationals kind of on my own in '91. I went to Loudon, I think. And
when you say on your own, did
Yeah.
you have any, what does that really mean?
It really means it was me and some friends. Okay. Like, that was it. Like, it sounds crazy, but yeah, I was changing my own wheels and stuff, which.
No way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was like, I was the guy changing my own wheels, going out on warm-up laps, going like.
You guys didn't have tie
the
warmers
wheels
back then, right?
The wheels
so
my fault. I didn't have no warmers. I wouldn't leave those on before leaving the pit, so that was good enough. But I was. I was the guy going out on warm-up laps, going that both wheels could fall off this thing right now at any moment.
It's terrifying, isn't it?
It's the worst. Like every time the Isle of Man comes around every year, I'm like, can you imagine being a crew chief at the Isle of Man?
Dude.
I'd lose my mind. I couldn't do it.
I don't know how they do it.
I wouldn't even put the tech sticker on.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it.
No, and imagine being the tech people.
Can't imagine.
Yeah.
But
now,
yeah.
Was your dad helpful or like supporting you
Oh,
at
yeah.
that time? Like, you imagine having a dad who's a superbike champ at that point. Like, were you on like the best of stuff? Like, was it one of those?
I was on
deals,
good stuff. Yeah. He used a couple of his connections early. So, some exhaust. That's a great story. I got some Muzzy exhaust because Rob Muzzy and early on in '91 when I was riding Suzuki's, my dad basically made me race my bike absolutely bone stock exhaust, stock bodywork, stock everything. So.
Headlights, the whole deal?
No, because you had to remove some stuff, but basically everything on the bike was stock, and it taught me a lot of lessons. And then what he did that was, whether it was his plan or not, is that one day I showed up at the shop and there was a Yosh pipe waiting for me in a box, and he's like, "We got you a pipe for your bike." I was like, "Wow." I had some ties with Fujio. I met Fujio at the Isle of Man with my dad, and he was 17 probably, and I was 10 at that time. So
who's Fujio?
Fujio Yoshimura.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
Yeah. So
and he was 17.
He was 17. So he was in the Isle of Man, and for whatever reason he got left. Something happened there where I was over there obviously at the Isle of Man watching my dad race, and there was a group of us, and something happened with the plans with Fujio, and my dad knew Pops Yoshimura. And so my dad took Fujio in, and him and I shared a bunk beds at the Isle of Man in 79 or 80. He was a teenager and I was 10, and to this day, like, if it's great because I've gone to Suzuka a few times and he comes walking in the garage to see me, and over there he's like a complete rock star, and people are just like, "Oh, Fujio's here," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know Fujio," But I came back to the shop one day and I remember picking up the box, and it was lighter in the box than my whole exhaust system on the bike, and immediately it gave me this huge sense of like confidence. Like, I'm going to take these. Back then they were dual exhaust coming out the sides. So I took those things off. They were so heavy you could barely lift them. And I put this, single exhaust on, Yoshi exhaust on. It gave me a lot of confidence. And I got body work. And then all that year of racing a bone stock bike, and now I'm kind of getting a weapon underneath me, and I felt a little invincible. Like I could win on this thing, And then the Kawasaki thing just happened by chance in '92. Where we met up with a dealer down south, Del Amo Motorsports, and I ended up getting a couple Kawasaki's from them, and with the ZX7R with the big air scoops that came in, the tank, and literally is probably one of my favorite bikes to this day. And we decided there we're going to go chase the AMA Nationals in '92.
When you show up to that, is there like that kind of like, thing around you, like, Reg Pridmore's son kind of thing? Like, was that a thing?
I embraced it though back then. Like, I loved it. Like, I thought, having my dad around was never a burden for me. It was always great. I loved it. I used to always have his name on the side of my suit, like Rego's kid, because he had a nickname. It was Rego, Rego, and so I used to always put that on my suits, and I embraced it. I loved it. I was proud of where I came from. I was proud of who I had as a dad, and he taught me so much. So there was a lot of people that were influential in my career, and obviously, from when I was a kid, having him around was great. So, but at the racetrack, he never made me feel any pressure. Never. He was usually always there to just give me little bits of advice here and there. And then over time that changed a little bit, as I got further along in my career. But early on it was great.
And growing up at the schools, I know you've over the years, you've like brought up things that he taught you all the way back then, but what were some of like the big things that you learned just doing the school stuff?
He taught me in a way where I still use some of the things. Even today, I was teaching somebody, and I was reminded of some things that he did for me, back then. And the things I remember, the big things I remember were don't crash his bikes. That pissed him off a lot.
I think
Thank you
you
for that
I
one.
think you told.
I went through that. Went through that stage.
Yeah, I think we went through that with you too.
Yeah, but I was pretty good on you.
Yeah,
guys.
you
I wasn't too bad,
No,
was I?
No,
All right,
You were great.
Anyways,
I did 2.
Did you?
2 of
I
them.
don't remember.
Dude, 1 here, 1 at Thunder Hill. The Thunder Hill one was bad, but I also had G-Man to
Forgot about that
shield
one
me.
at when you crashed in pit lane too.
Oh, the one in pit lane. The one in pit lane, that was
that
a
was
good one.
bad.
Yeah, that was bad. James, be really careful. The track's a little slick. He never made it to the track. Good work. It's really nice. And did you do any?
Right in front of you here. Yeah.
Oh,
that was
yeah.
just one.
That was
Just
weird,
one.
though. That was forgivable. Anyways, no, but he taught me a lot. I remember the biggest lesson is, I remember at Loudon, New Hampshire, it was absolutely pouring. And I decided I was going to go out and ride. I'm like, I got to learn how to ride in the rain. I'm out there riding around. There's nobody out there but me. It's pouring. And old Loudon, so it's not the new, not like as you guys would know it. So I'm coming down this hill, and I see a headlight off the distance. I'm like, oh, somebody's come out. And within 2 laps, they're on my ass. And I remember I look in my mirror, and we're coming down this big, steep hill, and it's my dad. And I'm like, and I remember the forks were so compressed in pouring rain on shit tires. And I was like, wow, you can really brake hard in the rain, I was just putting around. So there was a lot of little things that he did along the way. He raised me in a way that was on track, really, really solid etiquette that I still carry with me to this day, like getting on and off the racetrack and stuff like that. Never take anything for granted. Always be serious from the time you like literally put the helmet on and you're rolling out to the time you get back, and those are the kind of fundamentals and stuff that I still teach, to this day.
Mm.
No, definitely. I'm like locked in listening.
No, that's
I'm locked in.
yeah.
You always used to say something about shifting, like you did like 2-ups with him or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I used to jump on the back of his bike every opportunity I got. Every chance I had, I did it. And even after I won some nationals, I was like, it was just cementing something that I wanted to become. I remember when I was young and I'd see people get off the back of his bike and they'd be like blown away. Is it got an automatic transmission? You couldn't feel. My whole career was based on being smooth and applications of things that you had to do. And that was, for me, that was very influential. Like, and when I jump on the back of him, it always felt like I learned something. I always felt like I got something from watching what he did and how easy he made it look. That was the thing. It was like, there was never anything that he did that, there was never like a cool factor. You know what I mean? Like, he was just there. He was all business. And it was like, you're just going to do it this way. And it's going to be, you'll be fine. And I was fine. It was great. It was great for me to be able to do that.
Do you remember like the first time you were faster than him?
I do. Yeah. I remember, I caught him actually. We were in Atlanta and my dad was very regimented on lines and he was very like, this is how you do it or it doesn't work and this and that. And I caught him and I saw him look in his mirror and see me. We were at Road Atlanta and like the chase was kind of on, And I remember I could draft him down the back straightaway and then he'd come the old Atlanta with the old gravity cavity, he'd come up the inside of me every time. And then he'd run wide, and I'd cut it back underneath him and pass him. And he had a camera on the bike back. I mean, the camera was probably this big back then.
Shit, what year
No,
was
no,
this?
yeah. No, it was in like.
Was he
this,
winding it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it wasn't solar powered or anything then. But he, I remember it was on the front of the bike, and I remember flipping it off. I remember like putting my finger over it. And I caught him showing the video to the students and telling them how his tight line into the right-hander after gravity cavity going to the bridge worked so well. But then he'd stop the video. He didn't show me like cutting back underneath him. So that was pretty fun for me because I watched my dad turn into somebody he hadn't been for years, and his lines were opening up and he was doing different things. And I was like, oh, the bastard. Like he's doing something different after he's been so regimented on certain things. And that was a lot of fun for me. And again, one of my goals in life was to do a race with my dad, and we did an endurance race together. In fact, we did a couple of them. We did the first one we ever did was at Sonoma. We did a 3-hour endurance race, and my dad would have been probably 50 at that point. And he was still ripping, which was cool. And then we got stuck doing a 24-hour endurance race at Nelson Ledges together, which was miserable.
That's horrible.
And we ended up basically, it was just the two of us all night, and it just poured. Just rained the whole time. Just rained. But those are good memories for me. Those are great memories that
really cool.
that I have. That not too many kids say they get to do, a national. And back then the Sonoma race was a national.
That is unreal.
Yeah.
Is there any, like technique or riding style or that? How much has changed from what he taught in his class to what you either shifted? Obviously, the fundamentals must have stayed, right? But like, how far have you gotten away from that?
I think James, to be honest with you, that's one of the scariest parts about getting older is I still want to be relevant. With my job, I take my job now really seriously at MotoAmerica because I want to be part of the reason why the sport gets good again. I remember when it was good. I remember when guys like you were getting paid a lot of money to ride, and deservingly so. And people go, oh, it's never going to get back there. And I still hold out hope that it does. And I think that the series has gotten better. But to your point, it's why I still ride the way I do. And there are times when I get to ride really cool stuff. Like this year, I got to ride some really neat stuff. And I want to stay relevant. I want the kids that were even like Junior Cup. I had a couple of them come up to me this year, and they were like, oh, we didn't know you're still racing. I'm like, I'm not. I just kind of put my feet back in the water for a minute, But it was really cool because it let them see that the person that's in the booth is trying to stay somewhat relevant. I did that practice day at Thursday, and it's like all the nerves are there, and I sit there and I think to myself, what am I doing? Like this is stupid. Like,
And then you go put it P6.
and I was doing okay, and I found myself not doing
I
too
know.
bad, right? And
I know.
and it was great. Like the comments I got from like Sean Dillon Kelly wrote me something really cool, and who I really like his whole story, and him and about 4 other guys were like, JP, you're like ripping, and I'm like, didn't really feel like it, but I had fun. And Stamboli has always been so amazing to me. Like we've got a really neat bond, me and Richard, because we kind of started to feel some success at the same time together, and I think that's kind of stayed with us for a long time. But bikes have changed a lot. I rode my dad's Superbike. I got an opportunity to ride my dad's championship-winning Superbike 12 years after he won. So it would have been like 91 or 92 at Loudon, New Hampshire. This guy showed up, and they were doing like these parade laps. And Scott Russell was the champion then, or he was riding it was a Kawasaki thing. And I remember getting on that bike and thinking to myself, how did they race these things?
Well, how much like horsepower did they have at that time?
I think they had 120, 130 horsepower, maybe 140, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe not as much as that, but they were heavy. Bars were wide. So you had, there was a lot. Ground clearance was probably like what you ride or were, now that you guys have factory Harley Superbikes, they're not exactly the road glides that we're riding down the street, But yeah, they were big, they were heavy, they were cumbersome, and and the bars were. I just remember getting on the thing, and the bars were out here, and I was thinking, this could get me in trouble. And then what's great is that it had the same tires on it that my dad had ridden on. they were 12 years old, and it started sprinkling, and I'm like, what
Dude,
is
what are you
this?
doing?
Yeah, what am I doing? Another
nuts.
That's crazy.
But they were just parade laps. They were.
Yeah.
I didn't never get to go out and really ride it. They were just parade
How did it
laps.
feel like? Was it
Really slow on the throttle? I remember that, like it was stiff throttle, like it wasn't like easy, and I just remember thinking to myself, man, can you imagine like 30 of these bikes, 40 of these bikes on the grid racing against each other? It's like, whew, yeah, not for me. But that's the thing. Tires have gotten better. Bikes have gotten better. I've been able to follow that sort of evolution of what they've come into. I was there for the fuel injection when they very first started. The first fuel injected bike I ever rode was Matt Mladen's Superbike. He was off. I think he was getting married, and Yosh had asked me if I would come and test it at Laguna. So I rode this bike, and I'd broken my wrist 3 months before. And when they asked me, my wrist was in plaster, and it was messed up, and they called me and said, hey, can you ride this bike in like 4 weeks? I'm like, absolutely. And I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. Didn't tell anybody. And I ended up getting the cast cut off like a week prior, and I went up to Laguna. And the thing I remember the most is the fuel injection would always cut out in left-handers. And think about Laguna. So I'd be coming down through Rainy Corner, and it would cut out, and it would all the way it would go to my left wrist. And I'm like, oh, man, yeah. But I remember being there for all that. It was cool.
It's kind of insane. I mean, I'm just trying to think of guys who've been around that long that are still able to ride at the level you ride at. Like, have been able to experience a bike back then to now and still be able to be fast.
Well, and push. Like, there's one thing about like parading a bike, but and there's other thing being 2 seconds off. Mid Ohio, whatever it was. I mean, it's pretty insane that you're able to actually get to a point on the bike where you can, in all those time periods, be somewhat of a factor. Like, it's crazy. It's insane to think that, like, you were able to be in these, like the fuel injection. There's so many different time frames that you raced in at such a high level. And yeah, you didn't race in this one, but you're able to get an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, it was really cool to see the 43 on it.
Yeah.
Like, the whole night, it's like, I saw it and I was like,
I didn't even know you were doing it.
I didn't
really
know.
tell me
top
because
secret.
I was
like,
ready to bail on it.
I saw it. I was like, does somebody not tell me nothing? Like, am I gonna...
How that happened this year was I was in Atlanta, and I walked into the attack rig, and I said to Richard, I said, looks like we're going back to Mid-Ohio, because we had some really good success there. And we just started talking. I said, I said, I wonder if they're going to do like a Thursday practice there. Because remember when I did it with you, Corey, at Brainerd? Mm-hmm. I thought, and at that point I wasn't really thinking about riding. I'm like, oh, I wonder if they're going to do a Thursday practice. Richard's like, if they do, you want to ride one of my bikes? I'm like, well, what am I can't. At that point, I'd be stupid to say no right in front of him. I could always say no later, right? So I said, oh, that'd be great. And I never forget, he's like, right now, all we got is a 23 spec. And I said, Richard, it could be like a 2003 spec. It doesn't matter. You're like, I'll just go pedal a couple laps. And then before you know it, he's like, it was like 2 races. He's like, don't worry. In the next like 3 or 4 months, I'll make a 24 for you. And I'm like a month later, I was somewhere. He's like, hey, I got the 24. I got it all full of spec. It's ready for you now. Like, and I'm thinking, the next thing you know, I'm getting photos with my number on it. And I'm just thinking, and then I was sliding on my face in Spa, and I'm like, I ain't doing it. I'm not doing this. I am not going to go do this at Mid-Ohio and just make a fool of myself. But yeah, it's, James, it's funny. I just turned 55, as you guys said, but I just don't feel it. And I think that it really is. I'm that guy right now that's going to tell you the age is a number. But, when I started getting fit this year, all those little things started coming back, and I still love it. Like, I still love riding. And I love being able to go out and ride with you guys or whoever. It's fun for me still. And I don't want to lose that, So I think that's my motivation, is just to be, I don't need to go lace them up and race. I don't need to go think about doing a superbike race. I really don't have any desire to do any of that. But every now and then, if I can get on a bike and stay a little relevant and get a little bit of a feel of what you guys get to feel to this day, that's fun for me. It's fun.
No, it was cool. Even racing with you last year at CVMA was fun. It was just, it's cool. It's cool to be out there.
Didn't he stuff you or something?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
Didn't like turn 5 or 6.
It probably got back at me if I did. That was a few years ago. Like when I did that one at when I did that other, I did a race here on a dare like 3 years ago when Greg and Dave were doing their Fat Man race, whatever they were doing. Yeah, whatever it was. Yeah.
Matt Mladen was at Jersey, obviously, and speaking with him, and I think you guys talked about it too, about him going and riding that Superbike.
Yeah.
And I think him, I don't know him at all, but just hearing the stories about him, like he has that like Mike Tyson kind of like animal mindset where it's like, it's like all in or nothing.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you are able to kind of not get to that point when you go and do the spa or something where it's like for him, it was like, I got on the bike and I started to feel those things of who I used to be. And I don't want to be that person anymore.
It's going to be interesting because I think he's going to come stay with me in a week. So Matt was a huge influence to me. Like he was a good friend to me when he raced over here. And he would talk to me about stuff that, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent, I had his trust and he helped me a lot, like he did. And I think that for Matthew, how he explained it to me the other day in the restaurant was basically, he's like, Jay, I got back on a bike. And he said, because Ben was with him, Spies was with him, which is weird in itself, seeing those two standing next to each other and hanging and being buddies. But I think it's great, by the way. I think it's amazing. But, he basically said, because Ben, I asked Ben, what was it like being on a bike again? And Ben's like, oh my gosh, it was great. And, it wouldn't take long, I don't think. I said, yeah, it's not going to take long. And I said, Matthew, like, what about you? He's like, Jay, because I rode a Superbike 3 years ago. And he goes, I got out there and I was a little off the pace. And I found myself in my brain turning into what I was years, and I don't want to be that person. He's like, I don't want to be that person anymore. That's behind me, and fair play. That's fine. I still get an enjoyment out of being on a bike. And I think the hard thing for me when you ask a question, Corey, like me getting in that mindset, I will sit here and tell you that no, I don't want to be in that mindset. But then when I'm 2 seconds off the pace, I'm pissed off. Like, why am I not finding it? And so even at Mid-Ohio, Cam crashed on that Thursday, and I came through there, and there was just debris everywhere, and I couldn't see the bike, and felt bad for Cam, obviously, and I pulled in the pits, and I'd only done like 20 laps, and I pulled in, and I said to Richard, that's it, I'm done. He goes, no. Richard wanted me to test the zero front. Yeah, and so I said, okay, no problem. Well, when the thing came down the pit lane on a crane, like, yeah, I'm done. I don't need any part of that anymore. And then overnight, I'm like, man, I wonder where could I film 2 seconds? I was like, my brain was still in that mode of it would be fun, but I also recognize where I'm at in life. And for me, it's I'm at a place right now where I just turned an age where I can really get into some really big golf tournaments. I just didn't want to get hurt. I just don't want to. Mind you, I literally fell out of my van a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, that's how it's going to happen. It's not going to happen anywhere else.
Sorry. What do you think but just talking about the Yamaha that you rode, I mean, that's like the newest spec Superbike, and they've kept developing it. Like, what was your feelings after riding that Superbike? Because it's arguably one of the best Superbikes at the moment. Like, what you've ridden, it's not that long ago that you did race, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you've ridden world endurance bikes, you've ridden a lot of motorcycles. Like, where is that is that one of your favorite bikes? Was it difficult to ride? Were you surprised that the electronics were better or worse? Like, give us some insight, because I've never run a full-blown Superbike.
Yeah. It's the second time I did it. The first time Richard asked Josh, he asked Josh and Jake and me out to Button Willow because we've all won championships for him. And it was the same thing. Show up out there, everything's first class. Got my own garage, got my number on the bike, and I was out of shape, to be fair. I just was out of shape, and it pissed me off because I was going out and I was only doing like 4 laps at a time because I didn't have the endurance to really ride the bike the way I wanted to ride it, and I wasn't going to get hurt trying. So I had to check myself, and I thought if the opportunity comes up again, I'll be more fit. So when I went out for the first run on Thursday, I shocked them all because I went out and did 16 straight laps, like right off the bat. And the thing about Superbikes now, they're easier to ride, but they're more physical. So by that, I mean, with the things that are on the bikes, with the electronics and the stuff that helps you guys, right? It makes it to where you can, I don't want to use the word careless, but you can ride them more physical. You can ride them harder for longer, which makes it more physical because now you can ride at a certain pace for a longer time at a hard pace. It's like when you go to like a Coda where it was hot or any of the places where it gets really warm, that would take it out of you. But because back in the day, even though you could still ride bikes really hard all the way through a race, 4 or 5 laps in, you had to be mindful with no TC, of wherever track you were at. You had to be a little bit mindful. And At least I did anyways. I was always a little bit mindful, but nowadays I feel like you can ride them harder for longer. And I think a great case in point in that is if you look at like Bobby at Mid-Ohio this year, you look at him there, you even look at him at Jersey this year, Coda this year and Jersey this year. He had a rear tire. You could tell the bike wasn't underneath him, but he could still run at the front. Like he could still manage it, right? Back in the day, if you had kind of a bad tire or if you had something that wasn't underneath you, you'd go backwards. You couldn't do that. And so Cameron's always impressed me because you know at Mid-Ohio when Heron was following SDK, and you know Cam has to win, right, for the championship, and he just couldn't get that little push because he had a tire. And it was kind of like that at Jersey, right? You know, we kind of saw him, he'd fall back and all of a sudden he'd be right back. He would adapt himself and learn how to ride around that. And I've seen Heron do it too, all these guys. And I don't think that you could do that as much back then. If you were kind of hosed or screwed on or lack of grip, it was harder to do for 25 laps.
What's the biggest thing about the bike that you were like surprised about from them 2 tests? Like in, you know, the latest spec.
Yeah.
As far as like, is it electronics? Is it, you know, stiffness and is it brakes? Like
brakes were amazing. I couldn't believe how well it shifted. The bike shifted like butter. Like, and when I would come out of turn 1 at Mid-Ohio back in the day, we'd go up a gear just like we do now. We'd go, you'd go from third up to fourth, back to third, back to second, right? But I remember when I'd click it to fourth, it would just pull and pull and pull. Not now. So like that, the feeling of it just continuing to pull was amazing because I know the numbers that Richard has told me about my Formula Extreme bike in like 2002 and 3, where it made over 200 horsepower, what? and it used to kind of scare me to ride. I didn't even like listening to it warm up. You know, remember I told you yesterday, like I've been down watching the Harleys warm up or the baggers warm up, and they're just these big things and they're just rumbling, and it scares me. I'm like, ooh, you know. I used to be like that with my extreme bike. I didn't even like to watch them warm it up because people would come and look at it, you know, while it was warming up. And I remember at Brainerd specifically, I remember them firing up, and I remember watching people like running across the pit to see this bike that was started. And it was like, I felt like some weird fighter pilot, like I was getting ready to go to war or something. And the bike was intimidating. Now the bikes are just like, they pull like really good. Like they pull like a train, you know. It didn't never stop. Back then, I could go into that first little kink at turn 2 at Mid-Ohio, and even though I was in fourth gear, it was real manageable. But this thing just kept pulling. It seemed like it got me there a lot quicker. But the brakes, unbelievable. The electronics, like the wheelie control. I was still coming out of the last corner at Mid-Ohio and like rolling off the throttle a little bit, coming over. And Darren Marshall's like, Jay, just keep it pinned. And so I'm like, oh. Okay.
Is that something though that you just like you're so used to back in the day that you just like remember all these things and you're just like, oh, I had to do that here and there. Yeah.
I was chasing Corey here. I was chasing Corey and Michael here 3 years ago, and I kind of was with them for like the three or four laps of the shootout. And I remember it like it was absolutely yesterday. I mean, literally, I remember my thoughts, and exactly what I thought was we went down into turn 11 and 12 here, and I was kind of on the back of them. And we went to the left. It's a little off camber here if you've never been to Chuckwalla. And all 3 of us got on the gas, and their bikes moved, and my bike moved. And they kept squeezing the throttle, and I closed the throttle. And I'm like, I don't need to learn that today. I appreciate what they're doing. They can go right ahead and just check out. You know, it wasn't, because it's a whole different way of riding. Like back in the day when the thing would move around on you, you'd modulate a little more. And now it's like you can just keep screwing the thing on more.
What do you think the hardest thing throughout your career, because you kind of went through like the technological renaissance, if you will,
that's
of motorcycles.
That's a good term.
That's pretty good.
That's a great
That's
term.
pretty
like
smart for
you
you
like
two
that?
guys. Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, renaissance. Wow.
What do you think was like the toughest thing? You had the story about Jennings when you go test the Jordan bike and the thing just went off the track because the throttle body stuck open or whatever. But like, what was the toughest thing you think you had to adapt to with all those different like advancements?
The fuel injection era was pretty gnarly. It was different because you found yourself chasing a lot of problems. When I rode for Yosh, I had a bike that they couldn't figure out what the problem was with it. Like it would literally just intermittently shut off. And I went like 3 or 4 rounds with it like that before I ghost rode it. Yeah, I literally ghost rode it. It wasn't my proudest moment, but I was so pissed off because we had been trying to find a solution for the bike for so long. And back then at Pikes Peak, they were short laps, but they were long races, and it was always hot, and it was at altitude. So it was grueling, and I'd kept the tire underneath me, and I'd kind of worked myself up to fourth, and I was right behind Doug Chandler for third, and I felt great. And the day before, the team actually saw it, quitting on me coming across start finish, and they left, and all the boys worked really hard for me back then, and they just couldn't figure it out. And when they left, I thought, if that thing does it to me tomorrow, I'm going to be not very happy. And it, of course, it always happens. Doesn't happen on the third or fourth lap. Happened on lap like 40, because back then it was like 40 something laps around that place. And I just remember it was a real short lap. It was like 48 seconds or something like that. And it did it to me, and it just literally shut off. And I pulled it off the track, and as I was rolling along, I literally just jumped off the back of it. And yeah, I was just so angry, because I'd put in a good ride, and it's the problem. I had the problem for like 3 or 4 rounds.
You think there's video of that somewhere?
I hope not. I've never really talked about it much, but the story was, by the time I got back to my motorhome, it was already off the levelers. Everything was in, so I could just literally get out. I was really bummed about that one.
Yeah,
So
I can imagine.
Because Yosh was actually, that was my dream ride. Like early in life, I wanted to be on John's team in Wera, and then as I was coming through my career, I had a really good opportunity to go race World Supersport, and I chose to do the Yosh thing, because I thought that's where I always wanted to ride for Yoshimura. And I loved it. I mean, I met a lot of great people there, and I liked it, but I never had the success I wanted there. And that was kind of my one shot on a factory bike. Yeah.
Yeah. No. When we were talking about the bikes before, you said your dad's bike 12 years later. I'm like, we're racing against bikes that are 12 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we don't have those advancements. Anymore.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to hear. I mean, think like the Suzuki GSR 750 has been the same bike for
long time.
Literally 12 years.
Yeah. It's when I rode Richard's bike the first time at Buttonwillow, I made a comment, and it was no knock on anybody, but I said, it was, I forget how many years it had been since I'd ridden like a proper superbike. I think it had been 10 or something years, but I got on the bike at Buttonwillow, and I was within like 2 seconds of Jake there, Gagne, and they'd done a bunch of testing, and Jake Gagne is like such a class act. Like, that guy he would talk to me about things and show me stuff. And on that day, he's like, Jay, the times aren't going to be as quick today because the track's dirty. He was super accommodating, and I'd look at his data, and it was really cool. But I made the comment that if you'd have taken my dad in 1978 and put him on Matt Mladen's bike in 1998, he wouldn't have got within 2 seconds, because the bikes have advanced. They'd advanced, but they didn't have the electronics still at that point. That they do now. The electronics have made it a lot easier for a guy like me to get on a bike that I don't ride all the time, and I have to learn how to trust them. But the bikes have become a little bit easier to ride. But like I said, they're just more physical, because you can ride them hard for so long.
Yeah. Well, we're an hour in, so it's time for our Law Tigers Tech Tip. Law Tigers, we kind of prefaced you with this one, but Law Tigers presents a tech tip. Obviously, you've been a coach, instructor for a long time.
Yeah.
What's your obviously not a mechanical tech tip.
Yeah, I'm not doing a mechanical tech tip. I'm not gonna do like check your tire pressure.
What do you got for a guy who's just looking for some easy improvement on the track?
It's going to come as a shock, because I knew you guys were going to hit me with this one, okay? And I think you'll agree with me. Buy the right bike. There's a lot of people out there that they want the biggest, the greatest, whatever. And, we see so many people come through our programs that you just literally want to say they're just not on the right bike for them, for where their level is, for what they're doing. We live in a great country where we can buy anything we want, anytime we want. And that's great. I love that. I love the freedom of all that. But in other countries, you have to buy a bike by certain CCs before you can get to 1,000 or whatever it is, right? And I think a lot of people set themselves back early by buying the wrong bike, and the trial and error period of the sport can be bad. And so I would say, there's so many great motorcycles on the market that before you go and purchase the bike that you're going to do, especially if you're a track day guy and you want to go do track days, make sure it's a bike that you can learn on properly and you're going to have fun on. And then you can always continue to advance from there. And it's like, it might not be like an actual tech tip of mechanical or anything like that, but we see it a lot. And that's probably the biggest thing that I see from people when they come do a program is they just use generally on the wrong bike.
Got to buy the right bike.
Couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah.
1-800-LAW-TIGERS. If you or you know somebody who's in an accident, a motorcycle accident, please call Law Tigers. 1-800-LAW-TIGERS. Thank you for our tech tip, JP. Let's roll it back a little bit. Going back to when you were on the class Kawasaki's, right? In 1991? 92.
92 and 93.
So, but 91, did you got your first ever win?
92.
92. Okay, 92.
Yep, 92. I was
And that's in Brainerd?
Brainerd, Minnesota.
Talk to us a little bit about that because you beat Scott Russell, and which
did.
who's one of the greats.
Yeah,
First,
that put
before that,
me on the map.
what was the class structure like for people that don't understand? So like,
Now
you have like Junior Cup, Twins Cup.
it was a lot like
Super-
now. Back then you had 600 and 750 Super Sport. You had Superbike. You had might have even been Harley 883 class, like where Aaron Yates and the Bostrums and them cut their teeth. That's where Rispoli would have been.
Brother.
You know what I mean? That's where Rispoli would have been. I think at that point they were kind of there was classes like before called Battle of Twins. So you'd have Honda Hawks and things. That was a little bit before me. But they even had the Endurance Championship. They had like a 3-hour on Saturday. They would do like GTU National Endurance Championships back then. So you'd have teams, like proper teams, running in the Endurance Championship as well.
So you came in straight into 600,
Sport.
600
750.
750 Super Sport.
Yep. I did 750 Super Sport. And I think the reason for that is the year prior I rode GSXR 750 and GSXR 1100. And so the Cowie kind of fell in our lap. I think there was a couple connections there that could be met, and the new Cowie was great. And I went into it, you guys. Like I wanted to do the best I could, and back then it was great. You could double dip because there was a championship within a championship. There was a championship called Top Expert, and there was a lot of money in Top Expert, and there was a lot of money in the 750 Super Sport class too. So, like a win for me back then. I mean, a win for me back then was probably close to 15 or 20 grand.
No shit.
Whoa.
Yeah, because it was funny during COVID. I started cleaning everything out, and I found this. I got to show it to you guys. I found this old contingency sheet because they'd hand them to you at the beginning of every race weekend, of every company on there that was paying contingency.
Wow.
And so there was a Top Expert Championship. So I won the Top Expert Championship that year. And I finished second overall, I think, to Scott in 750 Super Sport. But it was like a race within a race. So even if you finished third, I was on the podium. If I was first Top Expert, I'd get paid on both. So it was great. And then Scott was like dominant. And I think Scott in 1991 and up to the time I beat him, he'd never lost in Super Sport. He'd won 2 championships and he did that. And he was literally back then, for me, Scott was, this is probably part of my problem too as a racer. I idolized the guy. Like I thought Scott Russell was like the best. And so racing against him was always super intimidating for me. And at Brainerd, I think it got to the point where he was winning these races by so much that he probably wasn't taking things as seriously. He was more focused on Superbike. Because you got to remember, it was just a year later he won the World Superbike Championship, I think, so in 93. And that day at Brainerd, I still remember it. And this is, again, you asked me a question about my dad. I remember just do what you got to do. Don't worry about what other people are doing and hit your marks and stuff. And I led the race. I had a great teammate back then named Fritz Kling. Fritz was 6 foot, he's like you, Corey. He's like 6'2", the nicest guy you ever met. And perfect teammate for me, just a super guy. And him and I were out front leading, and I kept on kind of waiting, like Scott's going to come, Then 6, 7, 8 laps in, I'm like, why am I still leading this race? And then it had gone to like +3. So, and I knew it was Fritz. And then it went +2, and I went, it's not Fritz anymore, And then going into the last lap, I had like a 1 second lead, and I'm like, just hit your marks. Don't even think about them. Hit your marks, hit your marks, hit your marks. And I ended up winning. And it was as big a shock to me as it was to anybody else. I can tell you that. And I still have a photo of myself because I didn't know how to celebrate. I didn't know how to do a wheelie. I didn't know how to like stand on my pegs and hold my hands in the air like I used to see Kevin Schwan. I didn't know how to do any of that. So there's a picture of me that I have at my house of me standing on my pegs, holding onto the throttle and waving to the crowd because I didn't know what to do, I still have it. Keeps me grounded. And then the very next weekend we went to Loudon, New Hampshire. We had 3 race weekends back to back to back then. We'd go from Brainerd to New Hampshire to Road America. And I was leading at New Hampshire, and he punted me. And I remember I was like 6th, and I came back through the field, and I finished 2nd. Like, I got on the podium, and I'm like, I'm going to win next week. I'm going to win. And I beat him the next weekend at MotoAmerica too. So those 2 races really put me on the map. That's when I got my first invite to Suzuka after that, the 8-hour. Like, I was a kid. I was,
How old were you?
20, 21.
Wow.
I was like, what just happened? You know, like all of a sudden it was like a thing, you know, and it was, you know, it's incredible to think about, because I still look back at what Scott, there's guys that have really influenced me along the way that I've really looked up to. And Scott was definitely one of them.
When he did that, would that kind of change that though? Like, as far as looking up to him anymore, was it kind of
when
like,
he punted me, it pissed me off. Yeah. I mean, I remember when it happened, and I got the sorry Jay, you know, and all that, and I'm like, I'm winning next week at Road America, you know, and then when I did that, there was a couple things that were really great about that, because, you know, of course everybody thought we were cheating, and it started pouring rain in Tech, and back then Tech wasn't in a building; it was under like these little tents, and it's pouring rain, and I remember there was like a AMA advisory board meeting that night. And Rob Muzzy had to be at that, and he wouldn't leave Tech because he wanted to know why my bikes were what they were. And there was another reason behind that. When we started at Daytona, I was on Muzzy exhausts. That's what I was on. And Lang Hindle came in, Hindle Exhaust, the president of Hindle. He came in and offered us a deal at Daytona and said, can I take your bikes to the dyno tonight? And if so, we'd like to do a deal with you. So we showed up with Hindle exhausts on our bikes. And Muzzy was pissed.
I bet.
And so, you know, 5 races later, I won 2 out of the 5 rounds, and he wasn't really happy about it. So it was kind of fun for me back then.
Yeah. So that's when that same contingency was like 15 grand a win.
Yeah, and Hindle, Lang was such a great guy, and again, another guy that, you know, I never really kept in touch with him in my life. I got to see him a couple times, and I always thanked him for everything he did for me. But I remember he offered me, like, he said, if you win, I'll give you 10 grand if you win. I said, okay. Well, nobody expected me to win. This is Daytona. Like, it's my first year. I won twice. So now he's got a $20,000 bill. And he was the sweetest guy ever. I remember him sending us exhaust to sell, you know, just hawk these. I'm like, yeah, okay, Lang, you know, and never held a grudge against any of that, because I just thought, you know, he took a chance on me, and that was really cool of him.
It's amazing to hear, like, there's someone, like, imagine an exhaust company now. If you can get free exhaust, you're styling, you know?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
This is a different time.
Yeah.
Who, like, of your career that you've gotten to ride around, obviously a lot of people, who was the most impressive?
There's been a few of them. Obviously Matt has got to be one of them. I got to see Ben rise from where he was at 16.
You came to the schools, right?
He did a couple schools. We had a great race together at Daytona where I beat him because I just was older and smarter. That was it. I had no business beating Ben at Daytona that year, and I did. And I said that day in the press conference, I said, Ben Spies will be world champion one day, because he was just that good, you know? So watching him go up against Matt, you have to tip your hat to him and what he did. And I still think his World Superbike Championship is one of the least that gets talked about, that should be talked about a lot more, because he just went over there and dominated like a lot of really great guys. So, but those 2 guys definitely come to the front. There was a guy named Jamie James back in the day, in the early 90s. Loved how he rode with just heart, and just manhandled the thing. Scott was a huge influence to me, Russell. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, obviously, my dad and my Uncle Kenny. He taught me so much about, not just about life, but just, he would give me a different perspective on riding than my dad would. So between the 2 of them, that's kind of what molded me along.
Even in the World Championship.
Oh, the World Championship. I mean, yeah, sometimes I forget I got to do some of that too. Bayless was pretty fun. He was great. He was great to be around. He was super accommodating to me. But when I'd see him on track, he would do things so different and so unorthodox. You'd be like, wow, there's a whole nother way of riding a bike that you can get away with and win and be really good at. And he really muscled a bike around. Troy did.
It was crazy. He used all arms.
He would pull himself. He'd get to the apex of a corner and give it as much throttle as he could, and you'd see him literally physically pulling himself up onto the bike. You know, I mean, when you ask that question, Corey, it's funny because my first year at Suzuka, I was Mick Doohan was there. You know, I was on the track with Mick Doohan.
Wow.
You know, I remember, you know,
talk about two That's insane that
Yeah.
you say that you have Doone's riding style and then Troy's riding style
Yeah.
in your life that you saw.
I got to ride with those. I got to be on the track with them. I don't know if I raced them, but I got to be on the track with them.
Yeah.
So Mick was cool. And I did again, I'm in Japan. I'm by myself. It's race day. I'm scared out of my mind. And they used to give you these vouchers for breakfast at the hotel, the Suzuka Circuit Hotel. Great place. And the fans would be outside the windows, peeking in, just trying to get a view of the riders. And I remember there were no seats. And there was a guy sitting by himself. And I went over and I put my tray down. And can I sit here? Oh, yeah, mate, no worries. It was Wayne Gardner. And I remember looking at him, and he's probably mid to early 30s at that time, maybe mid 30s. And he was gray, like gray. And I'm like, whoa, those 500s are taking some years out of your life, you know? That's what I was thinking. I played golf with Remy last year. I told him the story, and he was just laughing. I'm like, yeah, I had breakfast once with your dad at Suzuka. Like,
crazy.
Who can say that? Like, I think as you get older, you reminisce and you think about all the cool things you've done. And yeah, I shared a track with Mick Doohan and Wayne Gardner and all those guys. Colin, Colin was great. I remember when Colin was just coming through, like literally he was going and doing the AMA CCS Race of Champions and winning like 13 championships. He rode every class. So it was fun to watch him come through.
It's just crazy to think about that. There's so much stuff.
Dude, I'm trying to picture like the bikes and every time you're like telling a story, I'm trying to picture with like, it's so hard because I know the pictures of you riding certain bikes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to picture those bikes and like, Scott Russell, I'm like Brainerd. I'm like trying to imagine what this race would look like.
I got one for you too. Like I was at Mid-Ohio and I was out there on the track and I'm like, it seemed like every time I went out, there was never anybody around me. Maybe everybody just wanted to stay away from me. I wouldn't blame them, but I was catching a couple guys and I'm like, that's Ashton. I'm like, I'm catching Ashton Yates, right? His dad, Aaron, was the raddest guy to follow. Like you'd see some shit with Aaron and you'd be like, whoa, like he had some bike control. Like he had serious bike control. I told Ashton the story the other night in the restaurant. I said it was really weird and kind of strange, like seeing you there and knowing that I got to race at Mid-Ohio with your dad and in those places, and it was like Aaron was pretty special on a bike too. Yeah.
So when you won those couple races, you were still a privateer at the time, right? Whatever.
Yeah.
So when did it like become like a switch that you got your first real deal?
It was really strange. I never really understood why I didn't get an opportunity sooner because I won 2 races in 92 and then I came back and won 2 more in 93. It's just as a privateer. And then in 94, I literally had nothing. And I got with Robert Nutt, who's another guy who I wish I could find and reach out to and thank, because if it wasn't for him, there's no way I'd be sitting here. I got an offer to go do all the Weir Nationals on a Kinko's Yamaha. Yamaha had come out with the YZF 600 and 750. And I didn't want to do Weir. So I talked the team into doing AMA. And so we went and did AMA on Yamahas all that year. And that was good. And then I broke my leg in 95 really bad, motocrossing at the beginning of the year. And I was out all year. And I thought I'm never going to be able to come back. It was bad. Like I had to keep re-breaking my leg all year. And it was just a miserable thing, out for 12 months. And then Robert Nutt, at that point, the Kinko's Yamaha deal, they went to Kawasaki. And I literally begged him. I begged him to let me come back and ride for them in 96. And I had to go do a tryout, which is something you guys never have to do anymore, But Kawasaki wanted me to go do a tryout. So I flew to Moroso, Florida in January. And after 4 laps, they gave me the deal down there. I was really motivated. I remember I was really motivated, and Thomas Stevens was my teammate. And so I rode for Kinko's Kawasaki in 96. And I put some good rides in. Back then, that's when the S-Rad came along, with the Suzuki GSXR 750. And the whole field was GSXR 750s. And we were on these big, heavy Cowies. And I put in some really good rides on that, and that caught the eye of Bill Siphon at Suzuki. And then I got that deal to ride Suzuki, and I rode for them for however many years.
Do you think that your dad being who he was hurt you from getting more opportunities?
I don't know. I wouldn't want to. I would hate to think that it would hurt me.
Not necessarily in a bad way, but in
Yeah.
like the sense I feel like that way sometimes. Everyone thinks you kind of have it figured out because you've got your dad in your corner.
Yeah, maybe. I've never really been able to put my hand on why. There was guys I was beating, and I've tried to live my life in a way that I've always tried to be cool to people. I mean, I just feel lucky to do what I do. I mean, to this day, I feel lucky that I get to do what I do. And so I never really understood why, because I had the hunger, I had the desire. I was ripe for some team or crew chief to come along and grab me and teach me. I was dying for it, you know. And the reality of it is, I started in '92, and I won races, and I never got a shot on a factory bike until '99 when I rode for Yosh.
So at that time, what did every manufacturer have a factory team at the
Yeah.
time? So
Yeah.
it was stacked.
Ducati, Kawi, Yamaha, Suzuki, everybody had factory teams. Everybody was getting paid a lot of money. And in '97, I got to ride for when I went to Suzuki in '97. I'm like, all right, this is my chance. So I won the 750 Supersport Championship that year, and I won like 9 out of 11 races. And I want to say I finished 3rd or 4th in the Supersport 600 class.
What was harder?
600s were always a little bit harder, because even then I was riding for a kind of a semi-backed Suzuki team. I was riding for Hypercycle.
Okay.
And so there were still 10 factory bikes on the grid, and then us as well. So, you know, I was on the podium in Supersport, in 600 Supersport, which back then was great because I was a privateer essentially still. And then they asked me to go to the race. They asked me to go to, at the end of '97, Dunlop asked me to go to the GNF. And I'd qualified for those due to my AMA points, because I didn't do any club racing, obviously. I didn't want to go. I was like, I don't want to really go back to wear a GNF. But back then there were huge tire wars. So I got Dunlop asked to do it. I went down there and I won both of those. But while I was down there, I had my meeting with the main people from Suzuki for '98. And I asked for a certain number, and they gave it to me to race Supersport. And I mean, I got paid $100,000 to ride Supersport in '98, just to ride Supersport only. And that was, for me, the kind of money that was around back then was cool. But I felt like I was beating a lot of guys that were getting paid a lot more than I was. And so I just asked for it, and Suzuki was great. And at that point, I'll never forget, at that point, at the end of '97, I had erased all the debt that I'd had from like breaking my leg in '95. I went like 3 or 4 years where I was like, I didn't know how I was going to even get along. You know, what was I going to do? I was listening to Hayden Gillum on your guys' thing the other day, and it's just, I know what he's talking about, you know, and you just kind of get to the point where like, do I still want to do this and hang your neck out? But I knew back then, that was the best part back then. I knew that if I made it, once I was in, I could make
There's
a living.
some money.
I could make a living.
There's like light at the end of the tunnel kind of
Did
thing.
you? Was there? So did you? You didn't have any manager or any sort of thing, anybody helping you, or just your dad, or like how did that conversation? I mean, you just went in with a number and just met with them.
If I told you guys how I did it, you'd laugh, because I got off the plane in Atlanta and I went to Greg's house. That's how long I've known Greg White. And I said to Greg, I got to have a meeting here with Suzuki. And he goes, okay. He's like, here's what we're going to do. Greg was my manager. I said, here's what we're going to do. He was skinny then, too. He was skinny. So I said, all right, what are we going to do? So I wrote down all the pros of why I thought I was worth what I was worth. And then he typed it up and printed it out for me. You know, no computer stuff back then. We were like, we were like doing this, And I made 3 copies of it. And when I got there, I gave one, never forget it, I gave one to Bill Siphon, Diane Carter, and Mel Harris. I just literally handed them here. And I had one for myself. And I'm not going to mention any riders, but the 17th one was, I know what you're paying this guy, and I've been beating him all year. That's why I think I'm deserve what I get. And then the next day I went out and won both races, and I was getting on a plane. The next day, I don't think it was a beeper. I think it was a phone, but I got a call, and it was Mel. And he's like, Jay, we're gonna take care of you next year, no matter what. And I had 3 superbike rides involved in that. Kerry was gonna build a superbike, and I was gonna do like 3 rides on that, and necked myself on the 3rd lap of the Daytona 200 on that. So that started off well, but that's how it all started.
Huh.
Yeah.
And then that's where Uncle Richie came in the picture.
Uncle Richie he was the, you know how you see all these Moto 3 guys and Moto 2 guys and everybody like following and like
Looking for a tow.
Yeah, that was Uncle Richie. Uncle Richie would be sitting down at the end of pit lane waiting for me every time. And so I got to know him. And in fact, the way I remember the story is I was racing that Kawasaki at Homestead in '96, and Richie was down there on a GSXR. And I remember catching, like, it was Pascal Picat, Aaron Yates, and Michael Barnes. They were all in Suzukis. And I was catching them. And I lost the front, ran off the track, got back on, and I ended up catching the group that Richie was in, like battling for 5th or 6th. And I remember thinking, man, this guy's riding actually really well. Like he's riding really well. And I remember going over and telling him that, and that meant a lot to him then, I guess. And then that's how that kind of started. We became really good friends, and yeah, he'd always wait for me though. He was the originator of that move.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Dude, he's not gonna like that.
Find me a toe. But I loved it. It was great. Richie's, yeah, it was great.
Was there one race where you towed him around or something and they ended up beating you or out qualifying you or something? Was it Loudon?
I don't remember.
I think there was a
You know
story
what? I punted him at Loudon. I was catching him, and I punted him, and then I was like, "That's not going to go over well." Like, especially with all of his crew, you know, got all the New York crew there. So I'm like, I waved him back by. So we came on. I punted him in the last chicane. I waved him by on the front straight, like, say sorry, like, go. And then I stuffed him in turn 3 on the same lap. Him telling the story is a lot better, but that's how I remember it too. Yeah. But Richie was, it was a shame to see kind of what happened to him towards the tail end of his career, because he was talented, and he, you know, when he got Lyme's disease and all that, it really took a lot out of him.
Yeah, no, I always feel badly for him.
Yep.
He didn't ever get to live that out, you know?
Yeah.
But from there, obviously, you know, that turned into, I don't want to fast forward through those years, but you went to Attack, right?
Went through Yosh first.
Yosh and then Attack.
I rode for Hypercycle for 2 years, then I went to Yosh for 2 years. And I really enjoyed my time there. I was young. I didn't know enough about things. I'd ridden super sport bikes for so long that when I got on the Superbike, and you know, when you asked me earlier about guys that I looked up to, I know what Matt did on that GSXR 750 against the bikes he was racing against. And I'm telling you, some of those rides he put in on the bike back in the day were amazing. But he was very serious about his job, and he had a great crew. I mean, in this day, nothing has changed over the years in that. You could be a great rider. If you don't have a right crew chief, or bike, it's going to be difficult, right? I mean, like some of the most impressive rides I look at right now are like Quadraro. I mean, that guy's still motivated and he's still trying as hard as he can, you know, and it's impressive. So those 2 years at Yosh, I mean, essentially the first year at Yosh, Matt was like my data guy. Matt used to help me in the truck. He'd show me his data. He'd help me understand what he was doing. I'd go out and find a sec, and I'm like, oh, I'm on pace. And then I'd come in, and he'd be a second quicker again. I'd be pissed off again, you know? So he, and then from Yosh, I went to Attack. After Yosh, I still had, Suzuki was still so great to me. And by that point, I'd started doing schools for them too. And so I was kind of in that family, you know? And that's when Richie and I got with Stamboli, and we started Attack Suzuki back then.
And that was Richard's first team?
Richard had been there on Yamahas, I believe. But he hadn't had the amount of, you know, he was still very young at that point for Richard too. So he hadn't had like the success that he would go on to have and is having. So I was kind of there on the ground level of that with him. The first year it was me and Richie riding, and we were running Formula Extreme. In fact, it was the first year of the GSXR 1000, and we showed up at Sonoma, and it's kind of a stupid little trivia question, but I was the first guy to ever win a national on a GSXR 1000 because I won at Sonoma that year, and then I unfortunately I broke my leg in Atlanta.
Same leg?
Yeah, the different leg than I did in '95. It's the leg that gives me grief now, you know, my left ankle. So it's but those years with Richard was exactly what I needed. I had a guy that was super beyond intelligent, that would just fight for me. Like no matter what, he had my back. Like I had that early in my career, and I had that even with Kinko's. There were some guys there, but Richard, you could tell, was really throwing all of his everything into me, everything he could, and that, to me, it gave me a tremendous amount of confidence. Like I felt like I could ride with anybody.
He couldn't have been much older, right, at that time?
Yeah, no. In fact, we just had this discussion. I think when he told me at Mid Ohio, I think he's 60 now. So he was only like 5 or 6 years older than me.
Yeah,
right? So
I feel like that's what I mean. Think about that now, and like in our, you know, era of racing, and like the there's no Richard Stamboli at that age.
Yeah.
Building a team.
Yeah,
you
no,
know?
you're right. And I think Richard was highly motivated to create a better business for himself. And he's just so sharp, man. He does not leave any stone unturned. He will give you, if he knows that you're trying, he will give you every single thing he's got.
I think you can see that still. You can.
100%.
I don't personally know him. You know, I don't really. I just hear stories from but if you look at it, like the things he still does for Jake, Cam, no matter what, you can just feel the sense of like they turn over every rock.
He does it with me at the tests.
I know, that's cool.
It's insane. It's really insane. Like at Buttonwillow,
I just think about
when
like,
I was
the
gassed.
parts.
Yeah, all the parts and stuff that he'd show up at tracks with stuff and Jay, we're gonna try this. Jay, we're gonna try that. And it was always links or whatever. It was always like, even if we had success, he never stopped. And you know, I go do these. I've done 2 tests with them in the last 4 years or 3 years. I mean, I was at Buttonwillow, and he's like, Jay, we're whipping this shock off. I'm like, Richard, I'm beat. Like, he's like, no, I know you got another second, and we're gonna get this shock off. You need to be on a different spec shock because we can see it on the data. And I'm like, Richard, you don't need to do it. And then even at this one, at the test at Mid Ohio, he was all in on me, like just being able to ride and enjoy my day. And it's like, to see a guy that's been around as long as he has to still have that passion for that, it's great. I mean, but those were the years for me that I needed. I wish I'd have got those years 7 years prior, 8 years prior, because, I think some of my career, I have no qualms about what I did with my racing. I would have loved to have accomplished more. I think a lot of guys probably say that. But my success with him was fun. It was great.
And you mentioned starting the school. So like, what led to that? Because that's obviously a huge part of your legacy.
That to me, legacy. I don't know. Come, Corey, like pouring it on a little there, Corey. It's okay.
It's true.
No, I appreciate that. When I won in '97 for Suzuki, and I was doing so many things for them, I was doing a lot of media for them, and just they actually came to me and asked me, we really want to start a school. Would you be interested? And I'm like, kind of groomed for it. So I went to my dad and I said, Dad, like, look, this is what's going on. And originally when I did it, I said, I'm not going to go to any of the tracks that my dad goes to because I didn't want to interrupt his business at all. And actually our school was based off of a different type of rider. It wasn't just a street rider. This was more for advanced riders on GSXRs and things like that wanted to get, track days back then. You got to remember, my dad and Keith were the pioneers of like coaching, right? And then even in 97, 98, there wasn't like 100 track day organizations like there is now, So it was a big deal back then for a manufacturer to have a school and then be able to showcase their products. And so then that's kind of, you asked me a question earlier about why I didn't get moved up and anything. I think one of the reasons I stayed with Suzuki for so long is because I never really got any offers from anybody else because I think they felt like I was so ingrained with Suzuki, which I was. And that started I think that started in 98 or right after I won my championships it started. And then it just went from there.
And, having the school, what did that do in terms of racing? Is that difficult to like transition into, because you taught for your dad's school for a long time, right?
I think my upbringing, I was already beyond that because I was racing and doing my dad's schools all through all those years. I mean, I was traveling all the time, just like I am now, but I was doing, 30, 40 plus schools a year with my dad plus racing. That's why when I was starting doing schools, I would tell you guys, I'm not going to do a school on a Monday after the nationals. Cause it's just, I know what it takes out of you guys, like to be there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the last thing you want to do is get up earlier on Monday to come and teach. You know what I mean? It's tough, but I did all that when I was a kid. I would literally fly from a national on Sunday night to be somewhere Monday morning around the country, wherever my dad was, to go teach.
And did you, like, when you started that school, did you like come up with the curriculum? Did you steal your dad's curriculum? Like, how do you? I came up with
my own twist on a lot of the stuff. I wanted to be a place where people could come and realize that there's more than one way to ride a bike, right? There's more than one way, and I wanted to be open-minded to everything. Still to this day, I am. Like, there's so many people out there coaching and teaching now that I've just gotten over. Like, I just do my thing. It's like what people do is what they do, and that's fine. Whoever they have that influences them and helps them, great. I want it to work for whoever. We need more people in our sport. So for me, it's back when I started Star School, it was a place where people could come, test theories and thoughts and ideas, and I'd give them honest feedback of what I felt about whatever it was. And that's how I did it. Now, I taught a lot of my stuff based off of being able to look at other people's data, seeing what guys are really doing on the bike, having teammates that were amazing and seeing what they did. I mean, last week you had Ben Spies, Aaron Yates, and Matt Mladen standing for a picture. I was teammates with all of them, and then Josh Hayes, I was teammate with Josh. There was a lot of guys I was teammates with. So I got to know what a lot of guys did on bikes that I could literally sit down and talk to them about it. So that stuff would get incorporated in my school, And that's kind of what I did.
What do you see when you see the new age of riding? This new style of like, everybody from kids now, everybody's dragging an elbow, everyone's hanging off, right? I mean, what
Yeah.
do you like? Sorry to pivot to this, but what
No.
do you think about when you look at that? Obviously, like GP, they've got crazy tires, crazy lean angles, right? They're not really hanging off that much. But when we look at races, like when they go to, like the one they just went to, some guys are hanging off insanely. They look like Jack Miller.
Yeah, no,
Like,
when
he's
we
like,
were watching the other day,
he's
you were
like
talking about
so far off. And
Yeah.
I mean, you can get away with that sometimes, but we're seeing kids now.
Hmm.
Everybody is emulating GP riders. What do you think when you see that on modern day production bikes?
I'm cool with it. It's evolving. You look back at when my dad was racing, everybody was sitting up like, Statue of Liberty in the middle of the seat, right? So there wasn't that, the bikes weren't as agile and things. I just think you got to be okay with change, and things do change. And there's some of the stuff that I think goes a little like, when somebody explains why they do something to me, then I can get on board with it a little bit more, But it's like, I have no problem with things evolving. And I think it's impossible. I've never been a guy that could ever compare what we do on street bikes to MotoGP bikes. It's the lamest comparison out there by far to me. Like they're so different. It's a Cessna to a fighter jet, right? And the bikes that we're able to buy, they're production bikes. That's what they are. Now the production bikes, they've come a long way, and there's a lot of MotoGP technology in the production bikes, but they're still not the same. And when you look at the lap times from what a Superbike does to a MotoGP bike at some of the tracks, they're a second and a half, 2 seconds off maybe. So the technology has definitely gotten closer, but MotoGP bikes are still a lot more rigid, a lot stiffer, a lot wider seats, a lot longer. There's just so many things that the average person isn't going to be able to relate on a regular street bike.
Yeah, it's like driving, going from driving a car on the road to driving a F1 car.
Correct. Yeah. To me, it's literally like that, probably. Yeah.
When you were looking at the school, obviously at that time, and then racing, were you all in on racing? Like, were you looking at in terms of like a trajectory for your life and business? And
I always wanted to have something to fall back on. Like I knew early that you can't race forever. So there were things that I wanted to do. And back then I had Mark as a business partner. I had people that would take the weight off my shoulders with the school so I could focus on my racing. So day to day, I was still the racer. Day to day, I was still the guy that was wanting to go out and race. That was my goal. And then we had some very specific, like the way I would look at it, like almost guidelines of, I needed to give myself rest in between. Like I didn't want to just go do a race and then go teach on Mondays. And I did that for a while when Star started. And then I'm like, it's too much. Like I need to be able to get away from it a little bit. And Mark and people I had helping me were always great about that. And because what's the point of going and teaching on a Monday if you're not really motivated to be there, or your mind's somewhere else? Or if I had a really shitty weekend, the last thing I wanted to do was get up at 6 a.m. to go teach. If I had a great weekend, I'm not a drinker, I don't party, but if I wanted to stay out and have some fun with the guys or my team, last place I wanted to be was going and teaching at 6 a.m. So, the thing is that they were always really cool about that. Suzuki was always great about it. And so, yeah, I always really focused on my racing.
When you were in that era, was it people were making a lot more money? Were you looking at racing like you could make enough to just be done racing and then, go play golf the rest of your life?
Yeah, I have no problem with the money that I made racing, but it wasn't like the money that you could just be like store it away, throw it in, and then you're good for the rest of your life.
But
like,
did you realize that at the time?
I did.
Yeah.
I did because I kind of knew what you had to make to, when Matt and Ben were making the kind of money they were making, and Miguel, and there was a number of guys that came along that well deserved, made a lot of money riding, that could put that away. And you got some guys like Jamie Hacking. He was arguably one of the best guys, that nobody really ever talks about. And he put a lot of money away, and he started a high performance like car shop or something. And that's,
really?
He just went full blown, like got away from it all. And that's what he went and did, And for me, I always knew my path was going to be bikes, and I was taught how to teach, right. And communicate with people. Like when you were asking about a manager earlier, I tried it, But I found like communicating with the people that I needed to communicate with personally was such a better way to go.
That's what I was going to ask too. Like, where did you, and obviously you're an announcer and all that kind of stuff, but throughout the schools, and you have a way to be able to connect with people and just talk and engage.
Yeah.
Where do you think, is that just something you grew up with? Like you had that naturally, or is that something like you learned from your dad? Or
I think being 14, 13, 15 years old, traveling the country with my dad and engaging with grownups all the time and meeting people and learning to kind of put yourself in the world where you gotta tell your story, or people want to learn about your story. It's no different like when you see young kids now. Like I get super impressed. You can tell a lot from an interview. And when we saw Matthew Chapin getting interviewed at Atlanta, I was like, man, I like this kid. He's just got a smile on his face, just tells his story. There's no scruffiness about him. Like and he's been that way throughout the whole year, and that's how I wanted to be when I was younger. I wanted to be able to engage with grownups and have them respect me for what I was trying to do. And I think that has played out throughout my life. The job that I have now with MotoAmerica, I have my reasons of why I really wanted this job. And it was the same thing when I got the call and the opportunity. I was like, I was just as happy as I would have been when I got my factory ride. I was like, this is where I want to do. This is what I wanted to do. And TV's a lot harder than people think. It's so much harder than people think. And the first 3 or 4 years were really tough because we had the same guys winning every race.
Yeah.
And that's really hard because you're trying to tell stories and you run out of stories.
You can't even commentate on the race because it's so spread out. It's really tough.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done a couple little things in the booth and AFT and stuff, and it's super intimidating, very pressure. Like you feel like it's so easy. Like even talking on this podcast, it's so much easier to talk, and then you go on there and it's like you don't want to say anything, or if you say something wrong, everybody just calls you out for being like, if you make one mistake, everyone's looking at the TV like, oh, you didn't see that. And it's like, well,
you're right.
You're trying to manage everything.
You're 1,000,000% right. When I started this, Greg was like, everybody's going to love you when you start and see how they feel about you in 10 years, and I'm going on 10 years next year of doing it, which is just insane. Right. Yeah. And, when I took the job, I did it because I believed in what Wayne and Chuck and them guys were doing, and we needed it. Like, it didn't matter who came along and took it over. We needed somebody to come in and give this thing a fresh start. And I remember all the great things that this sport gave me. And it's like, man, I want other people to have that opportunity. So, when you walk through the paddock and people thank you for saying something nice, or they do whatever, it's like, it's really nice for me because I don't ever want to criticize you guys. I have to do my job. If I see something stupid, I got to kind of call it out, right? And if it's that egregious, most people will agree. People are always going to have their favorites. So if you're mean to that favorite, they're going to be pissed off at you or whatever. I learned in the first year to not give a shit about anything internet-wise or any of that stuff. I don't. Generally, the people that are bitching at you, when you get face-to-face with them, the whole attitude changes. Like, oh, you're great. Yeah. Like, wait a minute, didn't I see that you wrote something? Like, but I wouldn't know because I've never seen it. And it's like, it's not an easy job. But I want the sport to continue to grow. And I love it's never going to be perfect. It's hard to run a motorcycle series, and it's got to be impossible almost when you think about all the different rules and the things that they're doing and the balancing and stuff. It's brutal. And someone's always going to feel cheated, and no matter what. And it's got to be a hard job. But for me, being able to tell a story about you guys, or being able to tell a story about racers in general, that's my job. And I love it. It's great.
Did you, when you came, because you came up through like pit reporting with Speed, and
I did.
That's what I remember. A classic example is, I just remember the Daytona of you on the mic when I was in the Daytona 200 saying, "Hey guys, this bike's not on the stand." I just remember.
I do remember that. Yeah.
And as soon as they took the thing, it fell over. But I just remember you. Did you enjoy that part too? Being able to kind of walk around, because coming from racing, I feel like we anticipate things. We're like, we can get into the story because we know what's kind of coming, or like you're seeing things on the race and you can kind of. So did you like that a little bit more, or do you like being in the booth way more?
I like being in the booth.
Okay.
The problem with the pit reporting for me is I was fresh out of racing, so I wasn't ready to not be racing. Yeah. So I was interviewing guys I was racing against for a long time. So that was weird. I remember interviewing Eric Bostrom on the starting line at Daytona, And he's like, JP, what you like, you know what's going through my head right now? Like he was more or less saying like, you should be here. Like what? And I'm sitting there doing this interview and I'm thinking, yeah, I kind of wish I was, And then the first 200 I actually got to do full pit reporting was when they had the front tire problems. So they shut it down for like 2 hours and we were on live TV. And so I was supposed to interview like 3 or 4 guys. And Greg's like, all right, I got the first 30 riders this way. You take the rest of the 30 riders. And I'm like, what do you mean 30 riders? And so we just did 2 hours of interviews. And I was like trial by fire pretty quick. And then of course Dunlop was on my end. So then I'm like, they're like, hey, can you find Mike Buckley and interview him right now? And I'm like, I don't know if I want to. Like, this is not a good moment right now, but I did it. And, but yeah, the TV thing happened by chance. And I think a lot of it, like to your point, Corey, earlier, was just communicating with people and I did it once and then they invited me back and that's how it all started.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's something, obviously I grew up doing your schools and around people, but it never came easy for me to talk to people.
It's hard.
It's something like I've always been envious of how you're able to do that in James, like to just go in a room and be able to connect with people and have that. Like it's work for me where some people like you guys, it's more natural, so, but I'm always curious how people, like, I don't think I have that, but you met my dad, so you know how my dad is.
Yeah.
He is that way.
And I know how your uncle is.
Yeah. I guess maybe I spent too much time with him. I don't know.
Maybe spent too much time with Uncle Richie. And the other thing too, the greatest part about it for me is I was doing World Endurance too. So I still was getting to go race and then I'd come back and do some TV. So that was that made it easier for me, to be honest with you. Cause I used to get itchy and I'd be like, it's okay. I'm going to get to go race. Like, when I was doing World Endurance, it was 7 rounds. So there was more than just 4 now. And so that's what I would do to motivate myself, was like, as bummed as I would be that I wasn't racing in America, because I'd quit at the end of 2006 and I was okay with it. And then in 2008, I got opportunity to go back and go overseas. And so that actually helped me with my TV, believe it or not. So because it helped me get through some weird times.
And so the World Endurance thing, why? Was it because your dad did it? Like, what fascinated you with the World Endurance? Was it just getting that Suzuka opportunity? Like, why did you decide, hey, man, I want to go out and do 5 rounds and do like 24-hour Le Mans and Bol d'Or and things of that nature?
Basically, that same season in '97 when I won the championships, there was a British team called Phase 1 Endurance over there, and I wrote them an email, and I said, hey, I'm American, I just won this championship, and they had hired a guy named Doug Tolan years prior. Right, American guy named Doug Tolan. And I thought, I'll send him an email. And I got an email back within a week after Road Atlanta asking me if I'd come over and do the Bol d'Or 24-hour. And I was like, yeah. Because I think I always wanted to race overseas. Always wanted to see it. And at that point, I felt like my path wasn't going to get there in World Superbike. It wasn't going to get there in World Supersport, because I'd already turned a really good offer down there to go ride for Yosh. And I knew the MotoGP thing wasn't my gig already, because I'd never done 2-strokes. So at that point, that's what they were on. And I thought, well, World Endurance will be cool, because I'll get to go see some cool places and some cool tracks. And that's how that started. I just did an email, connected with a team over there. And then I was in the early 90s. And then I kind of rode some World Endurance in the early 2000s on and off, what I could make. My commitment was here. And then in 2008, I got a call to go race full time over there. And I'm like, I was only supposed to do it for 2 years, and I ended up doing it for 6 more. I ended it from 2008 to 2014.
What was it like racing? I mean, 2008, so the quick change aspect of it, was it pretty sophisticated? Because at that time, 2008 is when everything kind of crashed. But before then, full factories building 200 stuff. What was the level like?
It was good.
In World Endurance?
Yeah,
or
it was good in World Endurance.
Okay.
It was good.
Better than?
And now it's amazing.
Yeah.
World Endurance now is like
crazy. I think they probably take and give, for the flag to flag stuff probably helped, like Yart probably helped
Correct.
Yamaha and stuff.
No question. And I think, the first couple of years, the first 3 or 4 years I rode for Mako on R1s, and kind of newish team. A lot of struggles, a lot of little issues that we had to go through. But they were family to me. They're amazing people. They're just, Mako and Denisa, like I said, they're literally family to me. And so I rode for those guys, and then I got an opportunity to ride for BMW, which was crazy at my age at that point. I got a phone call to go do the Le Mans 24-hour for Pens.
I remember this. I was in your. What year was this?
This was it would have been 2011, 2012.
I was sitting in your couch when you got the call.
Yeah, and I was like why do they need me? Because I'd stopped again, and basically the reason they needed me is because it's a great story, you guys. I don't want to bore you guys with this, but I met the guy who I replaced this year. I'd never met him before. I didn't even know who he was, but I went back to Le Mans, and the team was in the hunt for the World Championship, and so they basically said they hired me because all the national championships they couldn't pull from anywhere else, and so I'm like, great. So they just called some guy in California, and they pulled me, and my first stint on the bike, I was a second quicker than the guys that were riding it. And I'd never ridden. I remember leaving pit lane at Le Mans. I'd always wanted to ride a BMW, always. And I remember, this is so not me, but I remember hitting the pit lane speed limiter off and just doing this big wheelie out of the pits. And I was like, oh, this is going to be so fun. I was dying to do it. And then the team won the World Championship that weekend. And so they invited me back. And then I was literally this year, crazy. I was sitting in a little restaurant in Italy at Magello. I'm at this restaurant, and I saw a guy kind of like looking over at me. No big deal, and about 2 hours later, this guy comes walking up, different guy, comes walking up and introduces himself to me. He's an American guy. And then about 5 minutes after that, the other guy comes walking up behind him. So that night when we won the championship, they had the awards banquet at the track, and they called me up on stage, and I'd had a handlebar break off in my hand in the middle of the race. The team thought I crashed because I ran off the track doing 100 with the bar in my hand. And so they get up and they kind of give me some accolades for that, which was very kind of them. And then they give me a medallion, world champion medallion, and this beautiful watch. When I came off the stage, I gave it to the team. I said, this belongs to the guy that deserves it. That's not here. Don't know who he is, right? No, didn't know his name, didn't know anything about him. So I'm sitting like, so what is that? That was 2012 or something. So 12 years later, 13 years, I'm sitting in an Italian restaurant outdoors in this little place. And this guy comes walking up to me and he goes, I saw you rode for Mako this year. Yeah. We talked for a few minutes about that. And he goes, I used to race World Endurance. I said, you did? Who'd you ride for? He said, Pens. I said, I rode for Pens. He goes, I know you did. I said, oh. I said, what years did you ride for them? He said, 2011. I said, wait a minute. Did I replace you at Le Mans? He goes, you did. I said, did you get your watch? And the guy like got emotional about it. He was like, I can't believe you gave me that watch. Because the team wanted me to take both. I'm like, just give me the medallion because they can get more of those. And that's why I gave him the watch. But how weird is that? I was over there with Simon and David and all the boys.
That's crazy.
And next thing you know, this guy that was in my life at one point that I never knew, I got to meet him in person. So it was really cool.
That's so nuts.
That's crazy.
Really
It's
cool.
crazy how small the world can be sometimes,
It's
right?
nuts. But World Endurance was great, man. So fun.
What did you do? It's a Yuasa question for Yuasa battery.
Yep.
What did you do to recharge the batteries after those endurance? Obviously, like you're doing. How long were the stints?
They were hour at a time. I would lose 8 pounds in a 24-hour race.
What?
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I would show up at the track with a pair of jeans, and the next day I couldn't even put them on. They wouldn't fit. They would literally just fall off me.
Wow.
So you want to know what I would do?
You would eat.
Oh my God, it's the only place I would go to McDonald's was Europe. I would literally leave.
You make rocket?
I know exactly where they were. I'd go get them. I don't even know what that is. Is that like a new thing?
No.
McRocket?
Yeah.
Tell me, James. What is that?
It's like a Dutch
no.
McDonald's thing.
Really?
No,
Yeah,
but
it's like
it's 'cause
the
Dutch
chicken.
girlfriend thing. the mayonnaise and
I
French
was
fries
talking
and all
about someone
that.
else who got the
Yeah.
McRocket.
Yeah, I didn't know what I'm like.
Yeah.
It's a family show, right, James? The McRocket?
He was a fascia.
No, I'd go to McDonald's and I'd get a Big Mac. I'd get a 12-piece chicken McNugget. I'd get a shake and like a Coke.
I feel like
Every
we
time.
did that after Le Mans one time.
We did.
Yeah.
If you were with me at Le Mans, we did.
I was there.
I did
What do
it
you
after.
mean, was I there?
I know you were there. What year was that? 2012.
13.
Was it 13?
Yeah, Jordan.
So that's literally what I would do after endurance. I would beeline it to McDonald's, and I never ate at McDonald's ever.
This is
Never.
not nutritional advice
No, it's not.
for anybody. Disclaimer.
Depends. Could be Greg White. You never know.
Stop.
That's probably what he's.
So that's your Yuasa recharge your batteries. Thank you, Yuasa. The most trusted battery in power sports since 1979. Go to uasa.com.
uasabattery.com.
You two ever seen Sweaty Balls on SNL? You guys ever seen that? No. You never seen Sweaty Balls?
No.
Oh, I know everybody's gonna look it up now. Go look at the skit. You
Don't
two,
Google
man.
Sweaty Balls.
No,
please,
do it.
guys.
It's SNL. It's Saturday Night Live. It's real. Go, you guys. The way you talk, the way you kind of look at each other. There's some references there. You got to go look it up.
Okay.
Not kidding.
I want to, though, we skipped over an entire piece that I know everybody's probably going to be dying to listen to.
Really?
Is like the Jordan. Like, right? We skipped over, Michael Jordan Motorsports.
That started even before that, though, with after Attack, you did was it No Limit was the deal?
Yeah. Found the Limit Racing.
Found the Limit.
Yeah. Yeah. Went to Found the Limit Racing. That lasted no time. Mom and Dad's kid just didn't quite have it just didn't work. So that was a bummer because that was, I sucked a lot of really good people into that program with me to help me. And then it went, belly up, which look, anytime I bring somebody in to do something with me and it fails not to my doing, still to this day, you can tell it doesn't make me happy. So, Richie was involved in that. John Ethel was involved in that. There were some guys that were involved that kind of got screwed out of things. So, so that was in 2004. And then that year was the year that MJ came to the paddock. So it was a blessing in disguise in a way, because MJ came rolling into the paddock at Daytona. And throughout those next 2 or 3 or 4 rounds, whatever it was, that was the talk of the paddock. And Richie said to me one day, he goes, "Hey, have you gone over and introduced yourself?" I said, "No." I said, "I don't need to do that." I said, "Golf will get us. Sooner or later, I'll be golfing with him." And Richie's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "No, the guy loves golf. And there's one guy in the paddock that plays a lot of golf, and it's me." And Kenny Abbott was the team manager at that point, and I knew Kenny real well. And Kenny came up to me at MotoAmerica and said, "Hey, JP, this weekend, you got to meet MJ. He's coming up from Chicago, I said, "I'd love to meet him. It'd be great. I mean, Michael Jordan. Who wouldn't want to meet Michael Jordan, And he walked me. I remember he walked me down to the truck, and we got into the semi. MJ was in there, and the first thing he said to me, he's like, "Hey, JP, how many shots do I get?" That's the first thing he said to me, and he wanted me to give him shots on the golf course. And I said, "Man, you just met me, and you're already begging." Those were my first words to him. And from that point on, Monday we were golfing. We played 36 holes, a little course just in the outer suburbs of Chicago. And then pretty much all that season, summer of 2004, I was golfing with him twice a week. I mean, I'm not going to say I lived in Chicago, but I was in Chicago a lot. And I just generated a relationship with him. He was amazing to me. Still to this day, I get to go golfing with him, and he was so generous. He was so into it. He was such a good guy. Learned a lot from him, just being around him, hearing the stories, places I got to go with him, the places I've got to play golf with him are amazing. Got a call from him. I was at Chuckwalla here, and I was going to go play golf with him. And I'm loading up the trailer back in the day, and I get this phone call. He's like, "JP," I said, "What's up, man?" He goes, "You haven't left yet, right?" I said, "No." I said, "I got a red eye," because I was going from here, showering here, and going right to the airport to be in West Palm by Monday morning. And he goes, "Hey, you need your passport." I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, you got to bring your passport because, I said, "Well, where are we going?" He's like, "Don't worry about it." Right? Just right. So I get my passport. I think I had my mom meet me because I went to LAX, and she met me somewhere to give me my passports because I didn't know I was going international. So I flew into West Palm. I get there 9:00 in the morning or whatever, and they take me by private car over to the private sector of the airport, and it's just him and I. I get on this plane, no idea where I'm going. I'm just flying somewhere. So I get on the plane, they shut the door, and I look, and I'm like, "So, do I get to know where we're going? Like, where are we headed?" He's like, "Oh, we're going to go play golf in the Bahamas for the day." I said, "Is that right?" Yeah. And so we jumped on a plane, and there were so many stories that were, I'd pinch myself and go, "How did I get here?" But golf was what got me there. I played golf at a decent level, and we got along great. And so we went to the Bahamas for the day, and I'm getting breakfast on this plane, and I'm laughing, and we're flying over the most beautiful areas that you could fly. The water is just like you can see through it. And we literally landed, got in a Suburban, went to a boat dock, got on a boat, and started just tearing across the ocean to this island, and played 36 holes of golf. Turned around, went back, and the best part of the story is we were supposed to land in West Palm at like 8:05, and as the story goes, it was like customs closed at 8 o'clock, so we were gonna have to go to Fort Lauderdale and then fly to West Palm, and then it was like, well, it's MJ, all bets are off. Then we're going right to West Palm. There was no, and so in at that time it was great because MJ just stopped and signed a few things for the passport control, and I feel like I could have had bombs tied to me and just walked right through. Nobody cared about me. Nobody cared about me at that point. And that was my day. I went to Bahamas, and then we played golf in Florida for the next 3-4 days, and it was great. But he's just such a cool guy. It's a shame he's not still in the sport.
Well, so how did that turn into actually going racing?
Yeah.
So in 2004, he was learning a lot. He was using me for a lot of information, I feel, and Richie.
So
'cause
he
I
didn't.
got
There was no
Richie
team
involved.
at the time.
He had the team with Montez and
Okay.
Pete,
Okay.
Pete from Gemini.
Yeah.
Uncle Petey, and they were going around the country with Montez, and MJ was really into bikes, and so they wanted to step up all the program for 05 and 06. So MJ was asking me a lot of questions about like what they should do and this and that, and I had Suzuki, and he had managers that were going out and going to all the different manufacturers, and so he asked me, he said, Jay, I don't want to ruin our relationship, so do you want me to go get my managers to go to Suzuki? I said, you know what, I'll bring you the deal. I think I can bring you the deal, And so Richie and I did a lot of work, obviously, on the back end of that. And essentially with Mel, I had such a great relationship with Mel Harris, another guy that I owe a lot to. Essentially what ended up happening was, long story short, I talked to Mel. I said, if I can get this and this and this and so on, I think we can start Michael Jordan Motorsports with MJ. And he goes, Jay, go ahead and tell him it's okay. I will okay all of that. And so MJ called me that night, and he said, how's things coming? I said, great. And he goes, what is there? What's on the table? And I told him, I said, we got this. He's like, I'm going to call you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I said, okay. So I just went to bed that night, and 9:59 the next morning, my phone was ringing. It was him. He's like, hey, let's do the Suzuki deal. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, and that's how that started. And I got to meet Pete, who is great. We had a great team. We had good guys on the team, and it was fun and all that stuff. And being part of all that in the early days was neat for me. Yeah.
And he was doing a lot of riding, actually, right? So
Riding a lot.
like
Crashing
Crashing.
a lot. Yeah.
I remember seeing the one picture of him just
Oh my God.
just on
with
the
the
back.
eyes. You got to get us
Dude.
that
Oh my
picture.
God.
Dude.
That's the greatest photo
This is
ever. I wish I
great.
knew where it was.
It's the greatest photo of all
Yeah.
time.
He crashed 2 bikes at Chicago, and he left me the greatest message that I have on 10 phones ago, where he's swearing at me, and he's like, you need to order 2 bikes like right now. Get the 2 that you have fixed. Just get 2 more bikes, put them on the trailer. This, like, I'm your boss. He's telling me, like, I was on my way to Mid Ohio because we did a school Autobahn on like Monday, Tuesday, and then Mid Ohio National was the next week, and it was just great stories, man. Just like, just all the stories I'd ever heard about him, all the stories, like everything. He's really down to earth guy. He's very super smart. Like, he is a guy that if you lined up 50 people in a room and you got to interact with them for 3 minutes each, a year from now, he'd come back and tell you all their names. That's something I wish I had. I don't have that ability to remember everybody like he does. Think about how many people Michael Jordan's come across.
Yeah.
And he'll come up and go, hey, Corey, like I hadn't seen you in 10 years or whatever, and you met him for 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's insane. How do you go? I always thought about it, just knowing you and Richie, having those experiences with him. How do you go from, being on a jet, flying to wherever, the Bahamas, to play golf, to then turning around and going home back to Ventura?
It's depressing, Corey. It's depressing. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but in some ways it kind of, I can
wasn't.
see how, not
No,
necessarily
no.
depressing, but like, you go from living one, where TSA is staying open for you guys to get through, back to just like normal life.
It's when you see what he has to go through on a day to day, the normality that he lives his life is incredible. Drives himself everywhere. I mean, you could do a 2-hour podcast on some of the stories that are just regular stories, but they're just like, for me, it was like, what is happening right now? This is insane, right? I mean, it's like he was just always super mellow with me and took me to some really cool places. And I mean, not a lot of racers that are out there now would know who Seve Ballesteros is, but he was basically the Tiger Woods of Spain. And MJ used to razz me a lot if I had calls on the golf course because we play so fast and stuff. And we were getting ready to go to Spain for MotoGP to go see Nicky in 2006. And I'm in Chicago. I'm playing golf with him. He's on his phone a lot, so I'm railing him. I'm razzing him hard about that. Like, come on, let's get off your phone. Like, we're playing, you know. And gets out the phone. He's like, "You're gonna like this call." I said, "Oh yeah, what's going on?" He's like, "Seve Ballesteros wants to play golf with us when we get to Spain." And I'm like, "That's no way, you know." Next thing you know, we're on a plane going to Spain. I'm playing golf with Seve Ballesteros, and it's like that doesn't happen. That's impossible. That doesn't happen, and it did. You know, first time I went to Spain, I got to watch Nicky win the World Championship, and I played golf with Seve Ballesteros, and it's like those two things alone were like, how does that happen?
Do you not find it hard to like not get sucked into though, to like wanting to be a part of that all the time? Or is it not? I mean, I know you as a person, so it makes sense that it doesn't really bother you.
Yeah.
But I could see if you stuck just anybody in that situation where it's like, how do you just flip it on and off?
You gotta stay level, I think, in that. You know, it's like he's got a million people around him.
Yeah.
You know, nowadays if I call him or text him, say, "Hey, I want to play golf in December," he'd be like, "Come down, just come on down." And he's always so accommodating. I'm always bringing a friend or two. And for 10 years, he would do a basketball camp 30 minutes from where I live. So I'd take the whole first 10 days of August off. We'd play 36 holes of golf every day for 10 days straight. And there would be like...
That's insane.
Every day. And it was like, it was fun. It was like, it was a vacation and it was stressful at the same time because, you know, you got all the boys out there.
Yeah,
everybody's
throwing down.
Everybody's trying to throw down and skim each other a little bit. So it was like, you know, you save up all year so you could play golf for that 1 week. You know? But he was always so gracious with all my friends and people. And to this day, like I went and saw him last year. It was last year. I played golf with him and at his new course. And he literally asked me about everybody that he met. That he hasn't done a school out there now for probably 5 or 6 years up in Santa Barbara. But he'll sit there and go, "Hey, you know," obviously he knows Nate real well and those guys. But there were guys he only played golf with twice. He'd be like, "Hey, how's Rich? He's great. How's Rob? How's the pilot? My buddy Rob Campbell." He's like, he just remembers everybody. It's just wild, and he's sincere about it, which says a lot about him.
Yeah.
Are those games pretty high pressure, or did your racing like prep you for that kind of pressure? Like, is there pressure? I mean, obviously you don't have to go into too many details, but there's money on the line, and there's
pride. There's a lot of pride on the line too.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, of course. So like those. I mean, you're a good golfer, but still, like, you can crack pretty hard. Was it different?
It was different, but again, it's that competitive feel. Like that's what to this day takes the place of racing for me. When you guys are on the grid, and I'm not saying you guys, I mean the MotoAmerica guys, my hands are sweating. I know what people are going through. I still try to be in that moment so that it helps my race calls a little bit. That's why it's like, you know, like Heron's right at Laguna this year, that second race. Like I could just see what he was doing, and it was like I was sweating for him. I'm like, this is amazing, right? Golf's like that for me now because I'm playing with guys that I really respect. Some of these guys that I'm playing against are ranked top 25, top 50 in the world. They're not pros or AMs, but amateur to pro nowadays is not that big a step. Like there's a million great golfers. So for me, it's the same feeling. And when we play those games, you always knew that you didn't want to outstretch, and you know what I mean? And there was a few of the boys that you'd play with that he'd have that you just keep a running tab. And that was dangerous because when you keep a running tab for a week, if you go into like we used to call it getaway day, last day, you know, you're a few grand down or a few grand up, you know, you're either going to get heat thrown at you or you got to apply it, you know? So it would always give you that little bit of whatever. MJ, the gambling things that I always heard about MJ, I'd never seen it. He'd play for $5. He'd play for a Diet Coke. He'd play for, you know, his standard line is whatever makes you nervous. You know? So it's
pretty good.
Yeah,
That's
because that's how he is, though. He's not there to make anybody uncomfortable. He wants you to enjoy your time. And I never really saw, the side of what everybody talks about, all that stuff. He's always great. I mean, playing for anything you want. I wish I had the money to like play him for a jet or something like that. That'd be fun.
Cool.
You know? That'd be
That'd
sick.
be sweet.
Right?
What about
you can bluff it out, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So
bluff
going
it
back
out.
to the Jordan Days racing, though,
Yeah.
you get on those bikes, like kind of going back to You've never really been a super flashy guy for me
Yeah.
that I've known. Like you've always been kind of super low key. Like when social media was a thing, you hated it.
Still do.
You hated me fucking promoting myself. But
Yeah, but you've gotten better at it now.
so
it's
yeah,
not-
I'm just authentic.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh my God.
Yeah,
The,
did you see his
uh,
Harley ad?
He's like a self-help. This is like a self-help pod now. All right, go on.
So, but you stepped into, Michael Jordan,
Yeah.
flashy bikes.
Yeah.
I remember that like half gold hat, like dude,
Yeah.
that thing was sick, and everything was a lot more kind of flashy. Did that really change anything for you? As well as like during that time, I remember stories of like you couldn't. It's not like today where you can buy everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like you couldn't
You're right.
buy the parts.
That's what ultimately closed down Jordan, because you could see that other people were getting stuff that we couldn't get. And to your point, James, first off, I'll tell you this. I've been lucky enough, like those years that were leading up to me doing stuff with him, there were times I literally got to stay with him at his house. His house was so understated and so polished and so perfect and just done. The architecture in his house is so clean. There's nothing flashy about it. It's just very, very classy, like super classy. I think a lot of the bike builds and stuff that you saw were somebody else's perception of what they were trying to portray for him,
Okay.
because all of his stuff is like even the golf course now that he built it for a reason. And you go to you go to Grove 23, and it's super, it's unbelievable, but it's very understated. It's classy, and that's how he is. I mean, one of the first times I ever stayed with him, it's pretty weird. I was in, whatever wing of the house I was in, and, I get a wake up motherfucker, on the call button coming through. So I'm jumping up and I'm like, I just got woke up by MJ. That's pretty cool. And next thing you know, we're going through McDonald's drive-through getting Egg McMuffins. All the windows are out, the thing. That's who he is, though. He's like, he's just he just tries to live his life regularly. The problem is the first race I ever did for MJ was Daytona. I almost won it. I ended up finishing third, and the AT beat me by literally half a wheel at the line for second. Haskovic that year was on Michelin's, and the Michelin was the tire to be on. He came through us. Me and Aaron were up front. Haskovic came by us and like pulled away from us like in 2 laps from the end. And we had to deal with Yosh. And it was like you could feel the garage door slamming on our face the second we barely got beat at Daytona. And from that point, it changed where Richie had to start looking over at Crescent over in England, and they had to start to try to figure out where to get swing arms, and all the things that we thought we were going to get supportive from Yosh never happened. And so that writing became on the wall real early, and it was like, you guys know, if I'm following Ben and I'm following Matt, and it's like I just couldn't get my bike to go certain places that their bikes were. And it was like I'm the first guy to hold my hand up and say, hey, I'm not good enough, or they're just riding better, or I'm the first guy. But when I come in and I say, our bikes just won't do what their bikes do, they just won't do it. And then I've got Steve Rapp as my teammate kind of confirming that. Then it was like, well, what do we got to do? MJ's like, what do we got to do? And we don't have access to what we need to do. So that was kind of, I remember kind of being a little bit of the beginning of the end of things, but that was later. It was later on, because MJ came out basically and said, like 4 or 5 years after I was riding for them, that if we can't get the same stuff to compete at the front, then why are we here? Like if we can't win, then why are we here? And now, like the rules packages now, he'd love them.
That's what I was literally going to be my next question.
That's why.
Do you think he was just too early?
Yeah, he would love to be like, if he was into bikes right now. And I'm not in the position to go call up MJ and ask him to, hey, let's start a team again. It's not. I would never do that in a million years, and I can't. Like I'm more. I feel like I'm more of his friend. I don't want. We've been down that path, and. He's in his NASCAR thing. He's fishing. I mean, the guy, he's 60 years old or whatever he is. He's fishing. He's golfing. He's NASCARing. He's doing his thing. I want to be able to call him and go, hey, can I come down and tee it up? Yeah, let's do it. Without having the pressure of feeling. Because there was a time not that long ago, like maybe 5 years ago, I was kind of thinking about it. And I took him some artist renditions of some things, and he was kind of toying with it. But, yeah, and that might have been, was that before MotoAmerica? It might have been.
It was like 15, 16.
Yeah, it was like it was right in that early time maybe. But it was like, for me, the man's done so much for me, and he's been so gracious to me that I would never go back that direction with him, you know?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. If it could come back now, and it's hard too because he's experienced NASCAR now, where he's probably making money. You know,
Whether he's making it or not, it's you know, he feels like he can win.
right?
That's what he's all about. He wants to win, right? So I think that he had enough great riders on the, you know, when Zemke, I think, did the double at Daytona. I mean, him winning is he wants the playing field to be the same. He's not looking for that big advantage, right? So NASCAR, you know, their rules are real strict. I haven't watched NASCAR in years, so I could be talking out my ass.
That's pretty good.
But they're
good.
they're pretty strict. So they're going to make it to where everybody does kind of the same thing. I just read something like he's in
Yeah,
there's some sort of lawsuit. He's calling somebody out, or right?
Yeah, basically, he's the only one that's big enough to flex on NASCAR at this point and say you guys aren't. Kind of comes from what I know of it is like the whole charter thing. You know, they're saying NASCAR is basically not doing enough for the owners.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, and that would be the path I would think he would take.
Yeah.
Is like, hey,
but he's the only guy that can stand up to him because nobody else is big enough
to do it.
Know?
Yeah. And so, yeah, I got nothing but great things to say about him and those years. They were exciting. They were fun. They were all. I can't believe they were almost 20 years ago. That's the scary part. It was 20 years ago that I met him, and yeah, I rode for him in 05 and 06. So it's like it's incredible to think it was that long ago.
What's the best bike that you, or the best bike that you've ridden? Like that you, so maybe not performance but like the best bike that you're like, dude, I wish I could jump back on in that time frame.
My Formula Extreme bike was pretty gnarly back in the day with Richard, and
didn't you ride a Vance and Hines Ducati?
I did ride a Vance and Hines Ducati. Yeah, I did. That was a great bike. I got hired by when Anthony Gobert was going through some of his stuff back in the day. By the way, that's another guy. Didn't even talk about him.
Crazy.
That guy did stuff on a bike that was, and just such a gentleman, just such a great guy, fun dude. But I had my own issues in '98 with the hypercycle thing. There was some stuff going on there, and I'd gotten disqualified for some things. And it's great because now
was there a bunch of cheating back then?
Yeah, I mean, everybody was cheating. You know, it's like you always heard all these crazy stories about things, and then certain guys would get picked on more than others, and whatever. But I didn't ever consider myself getting picked on. By the way, I'm not including myself in that. I wanted to win I wanted to win fair and square too, you know. But in that year, I basically said to Suzuki that, like, this will be a shocker for you guys because this could never happen today. I said, I don't want to keep riding and keep getting disqualified. And if I won a championship now, it wouldn't even matter anyways, because for the races that they didn't tear me down, I would think that I was on a cheater bike or whatever, right? So at that exact time, Anthony was getting in trouble for some other stuff. And so he was getting booted or getting suspended. And I knew Jim Leonard real well at Vance and Hines. So I called him. I said, hey, if I could get Suzuki to continue to pay me, do you think I could jump on the Superbike? If you think, he's like, Jay, let me go talk to Terry. So they got back to me and said, if you can, you go to work and see what you can get done. So I called.
That sounds like a Terry type of deal.
Yeah.
If somebody else can pay you, you can ride my bike.
Yeah. So and you're not far off. So I basically called Mel Harris and I said, Mel, here's the situation I'm in. And I gave him all the stuff that I felt. And I said, they were already considering me riding for Yosh in 99 and 2000. I said, this would be a good opportunity for me to get on a Superbike and go ride against the guys I want to race against. And he's like, I'll tell you what, if you can help us win the 600 Supersport Championship, if you can help us win that with Crevier at the time, if you can help us win that, I'll continue to pay you and I'll grant you to go ride the Ducati Superbike. So I went down to Vance.
That's insane.
I went down to Terry and I sat across from him, and back then there was 13 factory bikes on the grid in Superbike. So he said to me, he goes, first race was Brainerd I was going to do. And he said, if you, our goals for you. So, okay, what are those? He's like, well, we'd love it if you could qualify somewhere in the top 10. If you can do that, that would be great. And if you can try to finish like top 7 or 8, that would be our goals for you. I said, I in one way I felt like I was getting punched in the face. And another way I'm like, I should be able to do that if that's all it's going to take to make these guys happy. And with, so I go to Brainerd, never ridden the bike, never did any of that stuff. And, there's Matt and there's all the boys. And I come down pit lane with 3 minutes to go in the session. I'm on pole. And they are frantic. They're stealing Thomas Stevens' wheels to put on, on my bike. And I pull in and I'm looking at them and they're frantic. And they're like, And back then there was no big TVs. There was no and they're like, I said, how are we doing? Like, you're on pole. And they're scrambling to put this other tire. And they're like, but Mladen's out. He's going to go out and do a lap. I'm like, wait a minute. What happened to top 10? Like what happened to top 10 here, And I ended up qualified second, and I led the first 8 laps of my first national at Brainerd. And then I ran out of talent. I lost the front and what is it? Turn 5 now, the left, I think it is. Lost the front there and just ran off the track, and I ended up finishing 4th. So that was crushing for me because, I led the first 8 laps, and I did 3 races for them. I did 3 races for Vance and Hines, and I got signed for Yosh.
Do you think if you would have stayed, did any other offers come up?
Yeah.
Would they have hired you?
Terry wanted to hire me, and
what were the budgets back then? Like,
they were good. And it was going to be me and Ben Bostrom
on Vance and Hines.
on Vance and Hines Ducatis.
Your dream though was
no. At that point, my dream was to stay on the Ducati.
Oh.
I'm not gonna lie, I loved it, and I knew all the guys on the team, and I thought, again, I've got real knowledgeable people around me, guys that have proven winners. This is going to be great for me. And I got my feet wet. I finished 4th at Brainerd. Then we went to Chicago and boycotted that race. And it was only supposed to be for 2 rounds. But
like the riders or the
teams? Riders, we boycotted it. We got there and the track was that bad that we're like, we ain't racing here.
That's a thing.
Literally, we were walking the track going, there's no way. This isn't even happening. So
who raced?
Nobody.
Wow. So
literally,
everybody stuck together.
The whole event shut down.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, it was at Joliet, Illinois. And then they took me to Pikes Peak. And
that could never happen. Can we talk about this? I
Yeah.
feel like that could never happen right now.
Well, we have
I
no
don't
ground
think-
to stand on anymore.
I disagree. I think that MotoAmerica is not going to take you guys to places that are shitty like that. Like that was what they did there is they were trying to make a racetrack out of a drag strip. And if you've been to where drag races go, the booths and the suites and stuff sit over the drag strip. They had us racing through the middle of that underneath that. And it was literally 12 feet wide.
Whoa. And
you'd come out of this right-hander and go through there down the drag strip. And the chicane that they built at the end of that was all made out of Armco or out of cement barriers.
Oh, what?
Yeah. And then there was an excess road that you were coming back. And all the riders and I remember the craziest part about it is Greg's got a great story about it because he remembers that one of the teams started pulling their tents up. And that was the end of it. Everybody as soon as one team pulled their tents up, everybody pulled their tents up. There was a rider boycott at Pomona one year. Fred Merkel led that. It was nobody's riding. Rob Muzzy made him ride. So we're all standing on pit lane in our clothes. We hear one bike get fired up, and it's Fred Merkel who just got done leading this boycott, going out for practice. And we're like, what is going on? Oh, yeah, it used to happen. It was a real deal. And yeah, it was, yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So what happened with the Ducati thing? Why didn't you do it?
So the Ducati thing, basically they wanted to give Gobert another shot. So then I had a Yosh deal. But they kept me on. I did Pikes Peak, finished 3rd, and I was running 3rd on my birthday of all things at Vegas. And it was Mladen and Gobert and me, and the rest. And it was Chandler and Miguel, all those guys. So I was like, this is great. My birthday in Vegas, finished the season off on a podium, and I had the Yosh contract sitting in my RV. Because at that point I knew I wasn't coming back. Because Goey was there, they fielded 3 bikes, but they were that happy with me, which was great that they fielded 3 bikes. And Gobert, I remember seeing him put his hand up, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to finish 2nd. But he had just blown a head gasket, and I hit the fluid that he laid down, and I went flying in the air and broke my wrist. And yeah, and I remember Mel Harris coming and seeing me, and I just begged him. I'm like, I got the contract in my RV. I'm going to be fine. It's just a wrist. So that's how that happened. And that's when I went and tested the Yosh bike too, So, yeah.
Wow. Throughout all those years, is there anything that you wish had gone differently?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you kind of look back and you think things. I had a really interesting opportunity to go race World Supersport when I signed for Yosh. I had finished 3rd in the World Supersport event at Laguna Seca. And at that point, I was the only American for the long time. I was the only American that ever finished on a World Supersport podium. And, which was really cool, but I chose to do the Yosh thing. I don't have any regrets. Look where I'm at.
What was the team?
It was All Star Suzuki.
Oh, wow.
So it was Francis Bata, and Troy Corser won the championship with them. And he came and talked to me at Laguna after I finished on the podium, and it was amazing, opportunity. It would have been cool, and but I chose to do something else. I don't have any regrets. I don't. maybe the only regret I ever had was that I was bummed when Richard had to go to, like, he went to Kawasaki, and I couldn't kind of follow along on that with him. I think
Because you had the Suzuki.
I was with Suzuki. I was
Yeah.
doing schools, and again, no regrets.
Yeah.
Suzuki's was great to me all those
They
years.
gave you so many
They
bikes.
gave me so many bikes, and they supported me so well. But Richard he was kind of my guy, like I gelled with him pretty hard, and he always knew I tried as hard as I could, no matter what. So the day before I broke my leg in Atlanta, I had crashed and broke my collarbone, and the next day I led the race, like fresh out of the hospital with a broken collarbone, and I think from that point on, Richard knew that I was I was always gonna try. So I think I got the respect from him then.
Now, what about yourself, like personally? What is there anything you wish you would have done differently in that regard? Like, is there things you wish you could have like changed or like improved on or just been differently about?
I've often thought about what held me back a little bit. Like, I mentioned my teammates, and you think about Matt Mladen, 7-time Superbike champ, Ben Spies, Aaron Yates, like Josh Hayes. I'd like to think that in some way I was a good teammate to those guys, but I also think that from my personal side of it, I looked up to those guys a lot. There were things that guys would do on bikes, and I'd be like, wow, like that's pretty impressive. There were things. Aaron Yates won at Daytona on a GSXR 600, and he had no business winning that race. I don't even know how to this day he did it because the Hondas were so fast. How he held them off to win at Daytona from the chicane to the start-finish line still blows my mind. I remember Mladen staying out on a tire at Daytona that he should have pitted 4 laps early, but he stayed out there for fuel and for and like I just remember thinking how gnarly that was, watching that. And there were things that I think that I had so many other maybe little other things in my life that I was trying to start my schools. They didn't really interfere too much with things, but maybe just enough where I wish I could have just made that next step. I wish I'd have had more time on a real good superbike. That's probably my biggest regret. The best superbike I ever raced was Richard's, and I rode for Yost for 2 years. And
But why was Mladen able to win on his bike and you weren't? Because of the crew?
And I'm not bad mouthing anybody here. So, but my crew chief at the time, Chris Weidel, was a great guy, but he was pretty new to superbike stuff. And me coming from super sport stuff, I needed somebody that was going to explain to me really explain to me what I was doing. Matt was doing a lot of that, My side of the truck, I had Grant Matsushima. I had a kid named Jason who I loved. I had Chris. I had 3 guys for 4 bikes. I had 2 600s and 2 superbikes. Matt had 2 superbikes and 7 guys, 5 guys, whatever he had.
Oh,
so
you had to race everything.
So I was trying to learn as much as I could, but I didn't really just have the people behind me to really help me understand what I was doing right or what I was doing wrong. And you need that. You need that to this day. It doesn't matter who you are, you need it. And when I got with Richard, he'd explain things to me in a way I could really understand. I mean, we finished on podiums, me and Richard, against gnarly fields of superbikes. We finished on the podium on Superbike, and it's like, man, I wish I could have had a few more of those years. That's my biggest regret, I think, is that I wish I could have spent more time on really good superbikes, and I just didn't get that opportunity, I feel.
And I mean, obviously we know like your relationship with your dad and all that stuff nowadays.
Yeah.
Back then, did that have any effect on where your relationship went in that era?
No, like, look, I think it's got out there now that I don't talk to my dad. I haven't talked to my dad in 15 or 20 years. I love the guy. I literally love him sincerely. But we're just different people, And the thing is that I try to live my life every day. I try to be the happiest guy I can be. I try to do the right things. I love helping people. Like, for me, it's whether, if somebody if somebody pulls me aside anywhere and asks me a question, I want to give them the time to try to answer it the best I can, especially like writing or something like that, because I had a lot of that in my life when I was younger. I had a lot of people around me that I could ask those questions to. And it's like, like when you guys, as I watched you guys grow, I always wanted to be there. And then I think as I've gotten older, I feel like you guys, sincerely, I feel like you guys are so good now, you don't need me anymore. And then, I get with James 3 races from the end of the season, And he basically comes up to me and says, Jay, can you please just
Dude.
and all of a sudden I see things, I notice things, I put myself back in that realm. And it's like, I really like that. I do. I love it. I love seeing improvement and working with people. But my dad and I were just different people. And, people go like, well, you started your own school. I did, but I did it the right way. I went in and I talked to him. I told him what the plan was. I wanted to have him involved in it. And he didn't really see that side of it. But even then, we were still okay. But I just think it was like, we just grew apart, and my dad is just, like I said, he's just different. He's not a bad person. He's none of that. We're just two different guys. That's it. I want to live my life being happy all the time. And, I moved my mom in with me about 5 years ago. She's 85 and just ripping. And
Dude,
she's the greatest,
She's the best.
And I'm in a position where it's like, I love taking care of my mom, It's like, she's just an incredible person. And I would have loved to have had that with my dad. I would have loved for my dad to go to Le Mans with me, Bull Door with me, Suzuka with me. I mean, I literally, when I raced World Endurance, so after I was done with AMA stuff, that's when I wished that I would have had my dad around, because those experiences with him would have been so much more fun for me, knowing that he was there. He did all that stuff. Like, so for me, there's literally no grudges. There's no hate. It just got to the point where you just realize that no matter what you do, and it doesn't matter if it's your parents, it doesn't matter if it's a friend, it doesn't matter. As you get older, you develop relationships. And at some point, there's going to be somebody in your life that's influential that you're going to see for the last time for whatever reason. They could move away, they could go someplace or do something, and you're going to have new people come into your life always. And I was really the last to see it of certain things with my dad. But when I finally had enough, I just had enough. I wanted to wake up in the morning and be stoked, be happy all the time. And sometimes I just didn't get that, being around my dad as much. And I've had this discussion with Curtis Roberts. I've had this discussion with other kids that have had famous dads as racers. And there's a similarity there in some regards. My dad loved me. I loved him. There was never any hate. There was never any fight. None of that. It was just, I just had enough, and that's all it was. And but the endurance stuff would have been really cool.
That would have been cool.
It would have been fun.
Yeah, I just think hearing you talk about the earlier stages of your career and having him in your corner and the stark contrast. Obviously, I would imagine not having that person, and hearing you say the Yoshi is not really feeling like you had enough people behind you.
Yeah.
Wondering what that would have maybe been like if you had that kind of little bit extra confidence of knowing that guy's still there.
And I think we talk about it too. We talk about it, if certain people go down paths. I mean, I know I wouldn't have been as good as or great or as successful if I didn't have the people around me during those, years of trying to learn and meeting you and coming to all these deals and really understanding yourself, right? Because the values and whatnot. And I think that's something that's pretty, crucial. And we talked about it even listening to Hayden Gillum's pod, talking about when he went through his deal, and maybe things would have been different if he had some different people around. And I mean, you could say that for anything, but
for sure.
we talk about,
you can't help everybody, right? And when I watched Hayden's thing with you guys, I just sat there and I thought, man, I wish I could have been there for that guy. I honestly, sincerely wish, because I think a lot of Hayden. He's extremely talented. And when we lost him from the grid, I felt really shitty about it. I did. Yeah. And he didn't have the people around him. No matter, he can look back and he can look at those years and he can think that I had this guy behind me, that guy behind me, or whatever. But ultimately, it wasn't enough to keep that glue stuck together. And that's why when you come to me, or I get some young kid come to me, or what, I want to be there. It's I want to. If you think enough of me to where you're asking me, then I'm going to do everything I can to try to be there for you. That's just how I kind of feel I need to be.
Yeah. Going on to the topic of kids these days, we're getting long into this thing, but where do you think things are at? Obviously, you have a pretty in-depth perspective on stuff, but we were just talking about it last night. I don't know if this is the first year in a while, but there's no American that made the Red Bull Rookies Cup. Yeah. Which is super disappointing to see. And there's some kids that went over that's some made it through some of the rounds where how did that kid that's not the kid I would have picked to have got to the last round. And then there's kids that got knocked out in the first one you thought maybe would have made it. What do you kind of see in terms of the trajectory of the youth of American racing, I guess?
I honestly think that this new class, this Talent Cup class, it's more of a GP type bike, right? So it might put us a little bit more on the map in the sense that we might be able to get some kids showcasing some talent here that could get some opportunities. Like I'm involved with a team over there that runs a Moto3 team in Italy and Spain, and it's like a junior cup team over there on like Moto3 bikes, right? And there's been not anybody that I could really think to plug in over there, and not, and it wouldn't be like a free ride. It would be like, got to go to Spain, got to do whatever, right? But now we have like the Talent Cup thing. We might be able to see that more because, Corey, honestly, I don't keep up on the junior stuff, like the kids at the go-kart tracks, and I don't keep up on it enough because I just got so much other stuff going on. Yeah. And with MotoAmerica, my vision there is just I want to focus as much as I can and trying to get some talent. Like, right now people ask me, like, who's the next guy? Like, who's coming up? And it's like, well, right now in Supersport, to me, I look at Blake Davis, and he's a good kid, and he rides really well. He found something at the end of the year. He learned something this year at the end of the year, last 4 rounds. And there's a couple kids maybe in Junior Cup that might be jumping up. And the thing is it's so difficult. It's so difficult to get over there, but it's been difficult to get over there for a number of years. And the more the years go by,
it's harder.
The harder it gets. And the thing is, there's so many shitty deals over there. America was really the last place to buy a ride. Like it never used to be like that here. And I remember hearing about it all over the world of like, well, if I pay this guy $70,000, I can go ride British Supersport, or if I can go ride wherever, And America was really the last one that bought into, oh yeah, you can ride for us. How much money you got, right? But that's the landscape of it now. That's what's happened. That's why when you see Honda post contingency, I applauded them. I'm like, that's great, because that's going to give people a motivation to, I can actually make some money. Like Hayden the other day was like, hey, me and Ashton finally made some money. I saw Ashton in the restaurant the other day, and he's like, it's kind of nice. I actually made some money racing. And it's like, that should be, right? And I don't have the answer to make it to where you guys make money racing, but I want to be part of the solving, in the hopes that we can set a good profile for what we have here. And MotoAmerica is doing a nice job, I think. And if they weren't doing a good job, Wayne told me, he's like, you can be as critical as you want on TV, on whatever. If you disagree with a race director's decision, you got to tell the story. Like Wayne's great, and Chuck too. But I sincerely think they're doing a pretty good job on what I think is a really hard job.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, I don't know, every year I kind of feel more and more like the whole idea of even working to get kids to go to Europe is kind of dumb. Not dumb because you obviously want to get people to the world stage and race against the best, but it's like, if we focus more on what we've got here and just making this the best, and put all that energy into that,
you know what blows me away, Corey? How many people don't want to go to Europe?
Yeah.
How many kids don't want to go? That's all I wanted to do. And like when you see what Garrett did, Gerloff, he literally went over there with business cards, said, hi, I'm Garrett, walked around Magny Corps, which is a shithole.
Yeah.
And he walked around and he wanted to be there. James, I mean, you were in England for how long? And I remember getting the final phone call from James, just going, I can't do it anymore. I'm just beat down over here. They give me a van. I'm sleeping here. I'm doing this. And it's like, but he gave it a go. And those are memories like you were talking to us about tonight that you'll have forever, being able to go race all these cool tracks, right? But there's a lot of kids that are homebodies over here. They don't want to leave. That blows me away. If I had the opportunity to do it all over again, I'd try to get over sooner.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that you can't quantify is the want.
Yeah.
Right? Like for me, it was, I wanted to.
Yeah.
Once I went over to Le Mans, I remember it was always a dream of mine to go. And I remember going to Le Mans and just seeing the crowd.
Yeah.
We have the picture. We just pulled it up.
Yeah.
Dude, there were so many people on pit lane. It looked like we were at a club. And I was like, I don't care what I got to do. I want to just come. Yeah. I want to be in Europe. And I think that want sometimes supersedes good ride, or it's...
Well, look, every rider thinks they can make the difference, right? Like if you get an opportunity to go ride something, even if it's not the greatest, in our minds as racers, we always think we can make the difference. There's something that we can do, right?
That is so true.
And
that is
so
so true.
So you think to yourself to this day that no matter who's on that bike over there, if they lose their ride, I can make the difference if they give me a shot. That's how you have to think, right? So that's how I thought. When I went to World Endurance, I'm like, I'm going to make the most of this. And I made a name for myself over there. And then I was getting offered rides over there, which was like, how sick is this? I'm getting to go travel the world. I'm getting paid to do it when nobody was getting paid here. And I'm getting to go to some of the coolest tracks. You know, I took Andrew and Michael to Spa this year. They're both like, how do we get into World Endurance full time? How do we do this? Because it was the same thing. The crowd at Spa was insane. And they're like, wow, this is amazing, right? But then you go to Jersey, there's tons of people at Jersey. Like they showed up, and you're starting to see bigger crowds at MotoAmerica. Like you're literally seeing bigger crowds. And we're gonna go to VIR next year, and that place used to get a lot of people. You're gonna have a lot of people there, I'm sure, again. So but the want to get away from being comfortable. Like Garrett threw himself over there, and he'll forever have my respect on that because he threw himself into the deep end. Sean Dillon Kelly threw himself into the deep end to go do Moto2, and he's come back better for it. And I asked him, you know, would you ever go back? He's like, yeah, I'd go back. I'd go back maybe on a Superbike or something now, right? The Moto2 chapter of his life sounds like it's closed. He doesn't want to do that anymore. But he wants to, you know, I think he'd go back if the right deal came along.
Well, and I guess that's why I say that. Like, it's like you look at the SDK thing, that's like a prime example. He took that route where it was like his whole focus growing up was to get to Europe.
Yep.
And then he got there and he didn't even do badly. It's just, it was such a shit deal because he's American and there's so many things working against him once you get over there. It's like, you know, having him back this year was so cool because he grew as a rider, obviously racing in the World Championship, but all of a sudden the Superbike class was just, like, it was fun to watch.
He was unreal.
You
Like,
know?
he was really, really good. And what people tend to forget is that Moto2 class, they're assassins.
Yeah.
Like, he'd be 1.4 seconds off the pace, and he's 27th. And you're like, huh? You know, Joe right now, there's times when I look back, and I'm like, oh, Joe's 18th. He's 0.6 off. I'm like, oh, my God.
Crazy. It's a meat grinder.
It's just insane.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're a 20th place Moto2 rider, you're one of the best top 50 in the world, probably. You know what I mean? Like it's, and there's always that perspective, and you got to keep grinding. And guys like SDK kept grinding. I love seeing Cam come back and do well. I want to see Joe do better. Like I root for the guy all like crazy. When you had him on here, I loved it. You know, and it's like you root for those guys.
But I'm excited, like, for Joe. I'm excited for him to come back if he ever does. You know, I'd love for him to get to GP and
or World Superbike or
whatever.
I think
but
it would
I'm
be
just
great
excited
on
for him
Superbike.
to come back here, and then all of a sudden there's another. You know, imagine having Joe Roberts here and Garrett here.
Yeah.
In that Superbike class, like how crazy that would be.
Yeah, but we're starting to get. I'd say once a week I get somebody from Europe texting me like,
Wants to come.
100%.
Yeah, I just got a
That's so
text from
sick.
somebody too that want to do Daytona.
Yep.
Yeah.
I got one
Right,
from Marcel
from
Schroeder.
Europe.
Marcel Schroeder reached out to me a week ago.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I think it's so cool. I mean, that's why I feel like this year, going into next year, I feel so lucky to have an opportunity because I know how many guys are.
But think how long you've been doing
Yeah.
it and not had that.
Yeah.
And now it's like we're sitting here in October and you already know what you got for next year.
Yeah.
Like
it's amazing.
it's amazing. It's great. And that's the kind of thing though that will continue to get MotoAmerica better.
Yeah.
And like there's actually discussion right now about riders in Superbike, like who's going where, what's doing.
Right.
We went years without that.
Yeah.
Right.
And now that's out there.
Well, and it's also cool is your team's got a 2-year deal sponsor. Like we haven't had that in forever. Everybody's been
great.
so 6 months, 6 months, 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, it's like nice to have, you know, like Graham, you know, the Ray Hall deal come
great.
through with a couple years and a professional team.
And like you look at the bagger class and it's like the bagger class to me when it started, I was like, oh, you know, and now I look at them and I can't believe how fast those guys are going on
unreal.
those things. It's insane. Yeah. But what it did is it created opportunities. We'd never see Troy Herfoss if it wasn't for baggers.
Yep.
Right? So there are things right now within MotoAmerica that if people will just take the hate hat off for 5 minutes and look at what these guys are trying to do and realize that they're creating opportunities. You know, they're creating opportunity for you to have a 2-year deal. They're creating opportunities to have a 4-time Superbike champion come from another country and race in our series and build that to where the world can see it, you know? And that's what people got to look at.
What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have about the TV thing? You know, obviously you guys get a lot of shit at times for things and we know the backside of it, so we know
Do
like
we,
what
do
really.
we get a lot of shit? I don't even know.
Well,
Do we?
just like
No, you probably know more.
It's always
Yeah.
what I mean, you guys are the only public facing people, really.
Oh yeah, like
know?
me. You're talking about me and Greg.
Yeah, or just
specifically?
production in general. Like, what's the biggest misconception, or what's the biggest thing you've learned is like not how it actually works in reality? Like you went into it thinking that it worked one way, and the reality is it's totally different, and it's
Live TV is so gnarly. Like it's the window, because our schedule's so full at MotoAmerica. The window, and the reason why a lot of our races get chopped short is because they want to try to blame TV sometimes, and sometimes it is, but it's because the windows that we have to operate, and the truck is just humming from like 9 a.m. to whatever time at night. And you know, it's having people talking in your ear while you're going through things. There's so many things that people talk to me about, that ask me questions about TV, that I'm like, look, I'm just a commentator. I don't know why Live Plus isn't working.
right.
You know, like it could be, I don't know. I get a lot of those kind of questions. Like I will literally be sitting there and my Instagram will be pinging and it'll be like, hey, you guys are down again. I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about because I'm not on Live Plus, you know? So we do the TV thing of it. Getting the right information out. Sometimes that can be a little challenging if you don't know, but MotoAmerica's done a good job with that too. Like letting us know about team rider changes or sponsor changes or all that. But more importantly, it's the thing about Greg and I is we've known each other for a long time, and people can say what they want about me. People can say what they want about Greg. The thing is that guy sets me up so good. We know each other for so long. It's like we're having a conversation. It literally is a conversation. We are constantly tapping each other or finishing each other's sentences, or people will say, oh man, Greg's talking over you. I never notice it. I never even hear it. Or it could be vice versa. But it's just because we're having a conversation, and what people need to realize more than anything is our hearts are in the right place for that TV, that coverage. We want this to be successful for everybody. You guys, the staff at MotoAmerica, everything. We want it to be successful. So if we screw up, we screw up. Everybody screws up at their job at some point, and we're gonna make mistakes. And it's really funny when Greg or I forget somebody's name that we know really, really well. You just your mind goes blank. And you're like shit. And so, you know, I remember when he forgot Don's from Yosh. I remember when he
Sakakura.
he couldn't get Sakakura's last name out. And he's trying, he's going, and I go, Sakakura. And Greg looks at me like thank you, you know? Because you're around all you guys so many times and your brain's going so many different directions, and every now and then you just draw a blank, right? And we always seem to catch each other for that.
Is there a reason you have to? Do you guys? I feel like you guys say people's full name every time.
We have to.
You can't just say like,
No.
What? That's crazy. I feel like
it got back to us that somebody that we all know sent a really rude, mean letter to MotoAmerica about SDK because we were calling him SDK. You know what Greg does the first time somebody comes to the paddock he doesn't know?
Hey, what do you want to be called?
He literally walks up to them. I'm Greg. What do you want us to call you? Like what?
How is your name called?
How do you say your name?
Yeah.
Tony Elias.
Jimmy the Risp.
Yeah, Jimmy the Risp. Tony Elias, right? Is it Tony Elias? Is it Tony Elias? Is it Tony Elias? What is it, right? I asked Tony, I'm taking shit. How do I say your name? He's like, you say it fine. I say Tony Elias, and I think Greg says Tony Elias or Tony, however Greg says it. And Tony goes, it's okay. Either way is fine. And people will sit at their computers and bitch and moan about how we say somebody's name.
Yeah, that's funny.
Like,
but you have to say a full name. You can't just go and Rispoli fucking takes the lead.
It's either got to be last name. I wish I could say that. It's got to be last name or full name. You can't just go I can't just go.
James.
I could be talking about Corey and saying Corey Alexander on the roller die, blah blah blah, going on, and I'll be like, and Corey's doing a good job, and Greg will go Corey Alexander, right? And he's got a thing right there in front of me, like a notepad, that he's typed up saying full and last names only. And it used to be when we were on, the thing that used to really piss me off is I used to have to say the blue Suzuki, the blue Yamaha, the green Kawasaki.
What?
That's
The brand recognition thing.
had to do the brand recognition. So people would write in and bitch about that, but that's what we were told to do.
Yeah.
That's
a lot of people don't
crazy.
realize that's where I was kind of alluding.
Yeah,
with
thanks
that
for
question,
that's a
you
great
know,
example.
because
right?
like even the
Yeah, and, like,
naming the sponsors, like you watch MotoGP, it's something I was curious about because you watch MotoGP and they don't even say half the team names in their sponsors.
And we're not like, I'm not required to. Like the first year I did it, or second year I did it, this was a good one. I'm in the booth in Atlanta, okay? And you're kind of to blame for this, right?
Perfect.
So I didn't want to say the name, but I'm going to. But I'm up there and I say Hudson Valley Motorcycles. Bobby Fong was sponsored by Hudson Motorcycles. Okay? I say Hudson Valley Motorcycles, Bobby Fong. I'm saying their name, and I'm talking about Bobby Fong. Okay? It's in the middle of the race. I'm getting a text from Wayne Rainey. And I'm like, uh-oh, like, what did I do? Like, ugh. So that guy had gone to Wayne in the middle of the race to say that I said their name wrong. I'm not even required to say their name. I'm not even required to say any sponsor.
Because you said Valley.
I've been around Richie and Corey for so long, Hudson Valley Motorcycles. It just came out. It was a mistake.
Yeah.
Now, had the guy come to me after the race and said, hey, Jay, no big deal, but instead he goes to my boss. He goes to Wayne.
Yeah.
So I went saw him the next day and I said, you don't have to worry about it anymore because I'm never going to say your name again. So it's cool. Like, don't stress it.
Yeah.
You don't have to apologize to
for
me.
Sure.
Because there's going to be times when you make mistakes. You're on live TV or whatever.
It's pressure.
And it's not even that, James. You just get so used to certain things rolling off the top of your tongue. And that's why I'm surprised I've never got caught swearing.
We talked about that yesterday.
It's difficult. Like it's when you see something happen that's gnarly and you go, oh shit, you want to, all right? The rule in TV is you get to swear once. That's what they say.
One time.
You get to swear one time on TV. And that's the last time.
You still have yours though.
I think I've done all right.
Yeah.
It's been close, but
I feel like that's the thing with you is you don't really have a TV personality. Like you are pretty much you. Like Greg has like Greg on TV and then Greg not on TV. And they're very different.
Well, Greg, when he's projecting in the booth and you need I never wear earplugs racing. I feel like I need to wear them in the booth sometimes, when
He's gonna hate you. Do you think that?
He's not gonna.
Do you think that doing the podcast with him helped, or did, getting more comfortable with it? Or
for the 7 people listening, I think that it's I think the podcast has been fun. I cannot believe how many people talk to us about the podcast. It's crazy to me, and you guys probably go through it too. They probably come up to you guys all the time. Love Pipe Dreams. It's great. The thing about your guys' stuff is it's unique, so it's different. Like you're getting to get the personalities of the people behind in a way. Like Bobby Fong's was amazing. His his podcast with you guys was great because it was Bobby, and if he was in a room with all of everybody there, he wouldn't have been Bobby. Yeah. And when I found out he was worried about some of the stuff, I called him. I said, Bobby, stop it. Who gives a shit? He's a great dude. He's a great guy, and he rode amazing this year. And he's worried about whatever he's worried about. Yeah. And I'm like, man, look, no matter what, you're gonna have people hate you. There's people out there in the world that don't even know you that hate you. And what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do about that?
Yeah, for sure.
You're gonna sit there at night thinking about it, be worried about it, or you're just gonna get on with it. You just got to get on with it.
Yeah. No, I'm not envious of the TV thing, especially. I mean, you guys are fortunate. You guys just have their couple of shows, but for Raj, they're on there all day long. I'm like, God.
Raj and Jamie and that job at Live Plus that's a grueling one.
Yeah,
that's a tough one. And I think it's amazing that Roger Hayden is involved in anything that we do. I mean, he could be sitting in his home in Kentucky with all of his animals, chilling. He was at a Bears game today. Thank God they won for him.
He was there.
He was there today.
Yeah, I saw on his Instagram he was there.
Yeah, he was there. But I think he's in it for the right reasons too.
He surprised me. He's really good. We did that mini cup thing, and I was kind of nervous going into it because I've only done it a couple times. But I really enjoy it. I love it.
You're great for it though.
And I was like, man, I've never led a show. I don't even know how to lead a show. And I was like, Raj, do you know what you're? And he's like, nah, man, but I'll do it.
We'll figure it out.
And I'm like, I cannot wait to hear this. And the guy just goes up and smashes it. And I was like, dude, you killed it.
He's so mellow, and he's just one of my favorite people.
He is. He's awesome.
I love just talking with Raj, and he looks at you like, you know what, JP? He'll look at you and say something. You just love it. You know what I mean? You just gotta love him, right? What you think about this, JP? And you just love the kid. He's just a good dude. So, yeah.
All right,
Dude.
we're getting
We're-
there, dude.
we're-
We're
Sorry,
way
so long,
over
but
budget.
everybody's just pissed off.
I thought we were at a hard stop.
Yeah.
JP. All right, but you've listened. You say you've listened,
Yeah.
but have you listened
Yeah.
all the way?
Yeah. Why?
Okay.
I've listened. I mean, what are you talking about?
You know what's coming?
You can ask me what I want to eat.
Okay. All right.
Is that proof?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that
yeah,
enough proof
yeah.
for
Well,
you
most
guys?
people get on and they don't.
How about Chuck's menu? There's no way Chuck got that way. Like, was he Jello? You want a Jello?
Something weird, dude.
Like, I want a steak and
Yeah.
come on, man.
Yeah.
What did Loris say?
Oh, he wanted his mom's cooking.
No, at first he's like, just give me some French wine and put 2 straws in it.
Just trust it. Just get it rolling. I mean, I know Corey's. If you were gonna ask Corey, I already know what his is.
His?
Yeah.
Yeah, Grandma's Mac.
Or that, or In and Out. He's just ripping it in and out every
Yeah.
time.
Grandma's
Do you
Mac and
still
cheese.
do that
Thrown
when
past
you
that.
land in California? You're,
Yeah.
you're over
I'm
that
on
now?
the shred, dude. I ride a 600 now.
Stop.
Shred, yeah.
Did you
Right.
lie to me then when you first came in? You said you already
I did have one. I did
Yeah.
have one. It's the
Yeah.
off season.
Come on, man.
It's the off season.
Yeah. Oh, so
Um,
we went from on the shred to it's the opposite. Fair
Dude.
enough. Yeah, I guess it depends.
It's
when you-
109.
All right. Well, I do one a trip these days.
No,
Not
we're doing
like
2.
every day.
Yeah,
We're
that's
going-
good. That's all right.
Yeah.
That's fair play.
So you're on death row for.
Numerous things.
Why is he on death row?
Could be for anything.
You forgot your passport, traveling somewhere on a jet.
I didn't say some parent's kid's name right or something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
who knows?
yeah. Okay. All right, you're on death row.
Yeah.
Dude, what's your death row meal?
Well, it's funny that you say whatever my mom makes, because I'm a mama's boy, so every day she cooks for me. At 9 a.m, she's like, "What do you want for dinner tonight?" I'm like, "Mom, I've just barely opened my eyes. I haven't had breakfast yet, you know." So, yeah, what would I want for? Look, nobody's gonna know it, but a good pie and mash over in England. Okay, I went to pie and mash this year. It was amazing. So I love that. I'm a chocolate chip cookie guy, though. If anybody knows me, I can't say no to a good chocolate chip cookie.
Dude, I actually remember this.
Right?
We did so many chocolate chip.
You remember the picture we had? We looked like cookie monsters, you know. But like when I was training really hard, I used to buy the Toll House ones that you can buy, but they're like the minis. I'd go on like a 70-mile bicycle ride, and I'd take one out of the fridge and I'd just nibble it. I wouldn't cook it. I just nibble the chocolate chip cookie dough. So that was a problem. But yeah, I'd say my mom makes a couple dishes. She makes this chicken curry dish that is like one of my all-time favorites. Like no matter where I go, that's a thing. Pie and mash would be very high up on that deal. Any kind of dessert for me would be any kind of like brownie sundae and stuff like that. Like I'm not going to go too far off the rails, but when you go to Italy and you get gelato, if I could get a good gelato over there, like that's good stuff too.
So you're going pie and mash, gelato, but you don't drink.
I don't drink. If I was going to drink, I used to get forced to drink. Once I started going on the private plane and stuff, there were some drinking stories because I'm not a drinker, as everybody knows. But I would do like a Grey Goose crayon or something like that. Just
Real girly.
something girly. Absolutely, it's the same reason I drink oat milk vanilla lattes. Like there's a lot of information going out in the world right this second. How many followers you guys got? Hopefully not
Not that
too
many.
Okay, good.
Ask Jimmy. We're going through the roof.
Dude, we're in the ETH, bro.
So yeah, I'm not really fussy with my food though. I like to eat, and that was always difficult for me racing. I love to eat. I live in in California where Mexican food is like, it's pretty good. This
I'm
place called
surprised you didn't say Mexican food.
Bobby's Mexican food in Camarillo. It's one of my favorite burritos. That would be on death row with me if I could take it.
I feel like we always go to Mexican with you.
Probably.
Always.
Yeah. Well, we literally had a birthday lunch there.
We did, didn't we?
Yeah.
Maracas.
Maracas.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyways.
Well, Jay.
dude, this was big. 254. We were like, we didn't think we were gonna get this in.
Yeah.
Well, sorry. Yeah. Like for the longest time, I'm like, why do you guys want me on this thing?
I
Like,
know.
what is the
You
reason
just
for
kept
this?
it.
When you see the guys you guys have had on here, they're like names. I like watching it, but it's when you guys had Chuck on here, I love that. That was a good one.
I text Chuck and I said, "You got any dirt for me?" And he goes, "Oh man, I need more time." And I'm like, "Come on."
Literally,
dude."
you could do a 10-hour podcast with Chuck. If I would have been kind of in your ear on that one, I'd have given you guys some info.
No, we were on a crunch. His phone was ringing the whole time.
Dude,
It's hard to run a series and do a podcast the same day.
Dude, his stories are awesome.
It's crazy.
So good.
Dude, Jay, thank you so much for the insight. There's a lot of things I didn't know about you. I mean, I've known you for a long time, but there's a lot of things that you opened up on and earlier in your career that I may have seen pictures of, but I didn't really understand. Thank you for coming on, and obviously thank you for all the help you've done for me, and we really appreciate it, and we're glad to tell your story, and hopefully some more people can understand where your story came from and how you're not just somebody in the booth.
I appreciate it. Look, honestly, it meant a lot to me that you guys had me on today, and I think the world of both you guys. And hopefully you guys have both of you guys have a great year next year, and let's get through this winter at Chuckwalla and teach some people.
We gotta be out there at 7 a.m. tomorrow.
I know, man. No 6 a.m. Riders meeting in the morning. I don't believe, so that's good. But
who's
yeah,
going to
thanks.
listen to this first?
Dave.
Yeah, probably. No, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on, Jay.
Yep.
Appreciate you.
Yep.
Big love.